My husband locked me in a 6x8 concrete cell for 30 days, blaming me for his mistress losing her baby. This was something I never did. He thought burying me behind bars would make me disappear, allowing him to steal my life, my house, and my company. What he did not realize was that giving a forensic accountant 30 days of unbroken silence is the biggest mistake he could ever make. The day I walked free was the day I began dismantling his empire, brick by brick. My name is Gwen and I am 33 years old. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to outsmart someone who tried to destroy your life. The heavy iron doors of the county jail slammed shut. Behind me, the metallic clanging vibrated through the soles of my cheap canvas shoes. 30 days I had spent. 720 hours inside a cell for a crime I did not commit. As a senior forensic accountant who built a career tracking missing millions for elite hedge funds, my record had been spotless. That was until my husband, Bradley, and his young mistress, Sienna, orchestrated the perfect lie. I stood on the cracked pavement of the visitor parking lot. The Colorado morning air bit through my thin cotton sweater. There was no car waiting for me. No apologetic husband. No flowers. Just the harsh reality of the gravel beneath my feet. My personal belongings had been handed back to me in a clear plastic bag. I pulled out my phone and pressed the power button. It buzzed instantly, flooding the screen with missed notifications. But only one mattered. A text from Bradley sent 10 minutes ago. It read, "Do not bother coming back to the Aspen estate. Sienna is still suffering severe trauma from the miscarriage. After you pushed her down the stairs. I will not have you traumatizing her further. Go find a cheap motel. My lawyers will send the divorce papers and the chief financial officer resignation forms." By Monday I did not cry. The tears had dried up somewhere around day 4 in lockup, replaced by a cold, calculating clarity that only a woman who works with numbers could possess. Numbers do not lie, and neither did the facts. I never pushed Sienna. I was not even in the house when she supposedly fell. But Bradley had frozen our joint accounts, hired a predatory defense attorney who deliberately tanked my bail hearing and manipulated me into pleading guilty to misdemeanor assault. To save the firm reputation, I tapped the rideshare app. I had exactly one credit card linked to a hidden offshore emergency account Bradley did not know about. A black SUV pulled up 5 minutes later. The driver asked where to, eyeing my wrinkled clothes through the rear view mirror. "The Mercer Estate on Silver Lake Drive," I replied, my voice perfectly steady. The drive took 40 minutes. When the vehicle pulled up to the wrought iron gates of my home, I could hear the heavy bass of a sound system echoing through the pine trees. I punched in my master passcode. The gates swung open. I bypassed the main driveway, walking up the side path toward the sprawling backyard. The sight that greeted me was straight out of a luxury summer magazine. Caterers in crisp, white shirts were passing around trays of champagne and caviar. At least 40 people, wealthy investors, Bradley's golf buddies and socialites, were lounging around my infinity pool. And there at the center of it all was Bradley. He was wearing pristine white linen pants, laughing loudly with a glass in hand. Next to him, clinging to his arm, was Sienna. She was wearing a designer silk swimsuit, looking remarkably vibrant for a woman supposedly suffering from severe trauma over a lost child. But it was not her smile that made my blood run cold. It was the jewelry resting against her collarbone, a vintage emerald and diamond pendant. My mother's necklace. The one I was forced to leave behind in my jewelry box. The night the police took me away in handcuffs. I did not scream. I did not cause a hysterical scene. I simply walked through the crowd. The music seemed to fade, as guests noticed my disheveled presence. The whispers rippling across the pool deck. Like a sudden chill. Bradley's laughter died instantly, as he turned and saw me. His face drained of color. "Gwen, what are you doing here?" he stammered in shock. "You're supposed to be in a cheap motel." I ignored his panic, my voice carrying clearly. My eyes were locked entirely on Sienna. I took a slow, deliberate step forward. The crowd of wealthy investors and socialites parted. Like the Red Sea. Sienna immediately shrank. Behind Bradley's broad shoulders. She pressed a manicured hand to her chest. And began taking short, jagged breaths. Her performance was flawless. Designed to manipulate the exact demographic. Standing around my pool. "Brad, make her leave." Sienna whimpered. Loud enough for the venture capitalist by the cabana to hear. "She is going to attack me again. I cannot breathe. My trauma is coming back. She is unhinged." I did not entertain her pathetic display. My focus remained dead set on the emerald and diamond pendant resting against her collarbone. That necklace was not just a piece of jewelry. It was the last thing my mother gave me before she passed away. Bradley knew exactly what it meant to me. Giving it to his mistress was a deliberate, calculated insult, meant to break my spirit and assert his absolute dominance over my life. Instead of breaking, I reached out. I bypassed Bradley entirely, moving with a speed and precision that caught them both completely off guard. Before Sienna could utter another fake sob, my fingers wrapped tightly around the gold chain. I gave it one sharp, violent yank. The metal clasp snapped with a crisp pop. Sienna shrieked, stumbling backward, as I dropped the heavy emerald safely into the pocket of my cheap cotton sweater. She attacked me. Sienna screamed, falling dramatically into a nearby teakwood lounge chair. She clutched her bare neck where the chain had rested, though I knew for a fact I had not left a single mark. "Oh my God, she is psychotic. She killed our baby and now she is trying to kill me. Call an ambulance." Two of her friends rushed over, frantically fanning her with cocktail menus and offering her glasses of water. I stood my ground, smoothing out my wrinkled clothes. "Are you insane?" Bradley roared. His face flushed a dangerous shade of crimson. He lunged forward, and his large hand clamped around my forearm. His grip was punishing, digging deep into my skin. "You just got out of county lockup, and you are already assaulting people. You really want to go back to a concrete cell, Gwen? Because I will make it happen right now. I will call the judge myself and have your probation revoked." I looked down at his hand gripping my arm. My heart rate did not elevate. As a forensic auditor, I was trained to strip away emotion and examine the bare facts of any conflict. Fact 1. He was using physical intimidation to assert dominance. Fact 2. He was doing it in front of 40 high net worth witnesses. Act 3. He was terrified of me. "Let go of me, Bradley," I said, my tone as flat and unforgiving as ice. "Before I add battery to the list of things you are going to answer for today. That necklace belongs to my late mother, and you have exactly 5 minutes to get your cheap spray tan mistress off my Italian leather patio furniture." He laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that echoed across the silent pool deck. He released my arm but stepped closer, towering over me to maintain his perceived authority in front of his business partners. "You have no power here, Gwen." He spat, his voice dripping with condescension. "You are a convicted criminal. You have no money. Because I made sure the joint bank accounts were locked the minute you took your plea deal. You have no job. Because the board of directors is officially terminating you as chief financial officer on Monday morning. And most importantly, you are trespassing on my property Your property? I asked, tilting my head slightly. I reached into the oversized, worn tote bag the jail had given me for my personal effects. I am calling the police, Bradley announced loudly, making a show of pulling his expensive smartphone from his linen pocket. He looked around at his wealthy guests, playing the role of the protective patriarch perfectly. I apologize for this, everyone. My ex-wife is clearly having a severe mental breakdown. I warned the authorities. She was a danger to society when they released her. She simply cannot accept reality. He dialed the emergency number and put the phone to his ear, ensuring his voice carried over the quiet murmurs of the crowd. Yes, I need immediate assistance at the Mercer estate on Silver Lake Drive. I have an intruder on the premises. My estranged wife just broke out of jail and has violently assaulted my partner. Send officers right away. She is extremely hostile and unpredictable. He ended the call and glared at me with a triumphant smirk. The police are on their way, Gwen. They are going to drag you right back to where you belong. You are finished. Please, Bradley, tell them to hurry, I urged, taking a step back and gesturing toward the grand iron gates at the front of the driveway. In fact, tell them to send Sheriff Davis. He is the exact officer who handles residential evictions in this county. Bradley paused, his triumphant smirk faltering for just a fraction of a second. Evictions, he repeated, his brow furrowing in confusion. I unclasped the thick manila envelope I had just pulled from my canvas bag. I was ready to show him that my 30 days in a concrete box were not spent crying or feeling sorry for myself. They were spent preparing for absolute financial and legal war. The wail of sirens cut through the tense silence of the backyard. Tires crunched aggressively over the gravel of the long driveway. 2 patrol cars skidded to a halt near the side gate. Car doors slammed, and 3 officers jogged onto the pool deck, with their hands resting on their utility belts. They were clearly anticipating a violent domestic disturbance, based on the frantic way Bradley had described me over the phone. Over here, officers, Bradley shouted, waving them toward us. He quickly pulled Sienna closer to his side, playing the protective hero. Thank God you are here. She broke in and assaulted my partner. She needs to be removed and arrested immediately. Sienna buried her face in his linen shirt, letting out a loud theatrical sob. I am so scared, she whimpered. Please get her away from me. The lead officer, a tall man with graying temples and a stern expression, stepped forward. He looked me up and down, taking in my wrinkled cotton sweater and canvas shoes. Then he looked at the wealthy guests, in their designer swimwear. The contrast was obvious. I need you to step back and keep your hands where I can see them, the officer commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority. Are you Gwen Mercer? I am, I replied calmly, keeping my posture relaxed. I did not raise my voice or make any sudden movements. Your husband stated you are trespassing, and that you initiated a physical altercation. The officer continued, pulling out a notepad. Given your recent release conditions, this is a very serious violation. We are going to have to detain you while we sort this out. He is not my husband anymore, I corrected smoothly, and I am not trespassing. You are standing on my property. Bradley let out a loud mocking scoff. Do not listen to her, officer. She is completely delusional. The house is in my name. I pay the property taxes. Just cuff her and get her out of here. I did not argue with Bradley. Arguing with a narcissist in front of an audience was a waste of breath. Instead, I held out the thick stack of documents from my manila envelope directly to the lead officer. I am a forensic accountant, officer, I stated, maintaining eye contact with him. I build financial structures for a living. when this $10 million estate was purchased. 3 years ago. I insisted on a specific legal architecture to protect my assets. The officer hesitated but took the papers. He adjusted his radio and began scanning the first page. Read page 4. I instructed clearly. This house is not owned by Bradley Mercer. It is not even owned by Gwen Mercer. It is legally owned by the Apex Horizon Blind Trust. Bradley crossed his arms, looking annoyed but still arrogant. A trust means nothing. We are married, it is marital property. I turned to look at him, my expression completely blank. You really should read the documents you sign, Brad. The trust was established in Delaware. It was funded entirely by my pre-marital inheritance, which I meticulously traced, and legally firewalled from our joint assets. According to the operating agreement, I am the sole trustee and the ultimate beneficiary. You are legally classified as nothing more than a tenant. The crowd of guests murmured, exchanging shocked glances. The officer flipped to the next page, his eyes widening slightly as he read the highlighted sections. This says, his tendency is contingent on a morality clause. Exactly, I nodded. A clause he violated the second he moved his mistress into my home while I was incarcerated. His tendency is officially void. Bradley dropped his arms, his face suddenly pale. He took a step toward the officer. Let me see that. That is fake. She forged those papers in prison. The officer stepped back, blocking Bradley from grabbing the documents. Sir, these carry the official seal of the state of Colorado, and there is a signed injunction from County Judge Harrison attached to the back. I had called in a massive favor from my personal attorney, using my one daily phone call from the jail payphone 3 days ago. I knew exactly what Bradley would try to do. The moment I was released, the injunction is effective immediately, I told the officer, my voice ringing out over the quiet pool deck. That man and his guest are unauthorized occupants. Under Colorado property law, they are now the ones trespassing. I want them escorted off my estate right now. Bradley stared at me, his jaw slightly open. The color had completely drained from his face, leaving him looking sick. Sienna stopped fake crying and looked frantically between Bradley and the police. Brad, what is she talking about? Sienna demanded, her voice shrill. Tell them to arrest her. The lead officer handed the documents back to me with a respectful nod. He turned to face Bradley, his hand resting on his radio. Sir, I am going to have to ask you and the young lady to pack your belongings and vacate the premises. You cannot be serious. Bradley exploded, his voice cracking. I have 40 guests here. This is my house. I am a respected CEO in this town. You are going to take the word of a convicted criminal over mine. The judge signed the order, sir. The officer replied firmly, stepping closer to Bradley to assert control. You have 20 minutes to gather your essential items and leave the property. If you refuse, we will escort you out in handcuffs. The absolute humiliation washing over Bradley was palpable. The venture capitalists and socialites he had been trying to impress were now staring at him in disbelief. The powerful, wealthy image he had projected all afternoon was shattering into a million pieces right in front of their eyes. The lead officer gestured toward the massive glass doors. You have 20 minutes, sir. I suggest you use them wisely. Bradley stood frozen, his face flushed with rage and profound embarrassment. The silence on the pool deck was deafening. None of the venture capitalists stepped forward to defend him. In the ruthless world of high finance, optics were everything. Seeing a supposed multi-millionaire evicted from his own estate by county police was a catastrophic look. People were already quietly setting down their crystal champagne glasses and edging toward the side gates. They wanted nothing to do with a man bleeding authority. Sienna broke the suffocating tension. She let out a frustrated high-pitched scream and stomped her bare feet against the expensive teakwood decking. "This is completely unfair, Bradley. Do something," she whined, aggressively tugging at his arm. He jerked his arm away, his carefully crafted calm disintegrating into panic. "Shut up, Sienna," he hissed through gritted teeth. "Just go inside and pack your bags now." She recoiled, looking as if he had physically struck her. Without another word, she turned and stormed into the house, leaving wet footprints across the pristine patio. Bradley followed close behind, with the 2 patrol officers shadowing their every move. To ensure they did not damage my property, I remained standing by the pool, watching the catering staff awkwardly begin clearing the caviar stations. The remaining guests were whispering furiously amongst themselves and throwing cautious and highly judgmental glances in my direction. I did not offer any explanations. I did not need to. The truth was already unfolding perfectly, without my intervention. Within 10 short minutes, the lavish backyard was completely empty, save for myself and the lead officer, who stayed outside to monitor the perimeter. Exactly 19 minutes later, the heavy oak front doors swung violently open. Bradley emerged, dragging 2 large designer suitcases that scraped heavily across the threshold. Sienna followed right behind him, struggling with 3 oversized canvas duffel bags, stuffed to the brim with expensive clothes. She was still wearing her silk swimsuit, but she had hastily thrown a thick cashmere wrap over her bare shoulders. Her mascara was smeared terribly under her eyes, stripping away the polished Mistress facade. The officers directed them down the winding stone pathway toward the main security gate. I walked parallel to them on the manicured lawn, keeping a safe distance, but witnessing every single second of their humiliating departure. The walk of shame was long and degrading. Several of Bradley's wealthy friends were still waiting by their luxury cars in the street, having lingered to watch the drama conclude. When Bradley reached the end of the long driveway, he abruptly dropped his heavy suitcases. He turned to face me, completely ignoring the police officer's strict warning to keep moving off the property. His eyes were dark and venomous, completely devoid of his charming public persona. "You think you have won this round, Gwen?" He sneered, his voice carrying a toxic edge. "You think getting this house makes you a genius?" I stood on the other side of the wrought iron gate, my posture relaxed. "It is a very solid start," I replied evenly without raising my voice. Bradley let out a dark, menacing laugh. He stepped closer to the heavy iron bars, gripping the cold metal with white knuckles. "You always were too focused on the hard assets. You could see. You forgot about the liquid cash. Did you really think I would let you walk out of that jail cell with any financial leverage whatsoever?" I stared back at him, waiting for him to play his hand. "I froze absolutely everything, Gwen," he continued, a cruel, vindictive smile stretching across his face. "Every joint checking account, every mutual fund, every line of credit. I cancelled your personal credit cards the day you took your plea deal. You are standing in a $10 million house, but you do not have a single dollar to your name. You cannot afford the property taxes. You cannot even afford to pay the basic utility bills to keep the lights on in there." Sienna stood behind him, wiping her ruined makeup, looking incredibly smug. "Enjoy sitting in the dark, you psycho," she spat venomously. Bradley raised his chin, his arrogance fully returning. "I am going to bleed you dry legally and financially. By the time my corporate lawyers are done with you, you will be begging me to buy this house from you. For pennies. You are entirely alone, Gwen. The board fires you on Monday, and my family is holding an emergency meeting tonight. At the country club. To formally remove you from the trust board. You have absolutely nothing left. He grabbed his suitcases. Walking toward an expensive black sedan. Parked on the curb. Get in the car, Sienna, he barked. I watched the vehicle speed away. Down the winding mountain road. Leaving me standing alone behind my own gates. He thought he had completely outsmarted me. By cutting off my cash flow. He thought making me penniless would force me into absolute submission. But Bradley always underestimated my professional capabilities. I did not just manage money. I hunted it down professionally for a living. And he had just handed me the exact motivation I needed. To crash his exclusive family dinner tonight. I walked back into my empty $10 million home. The silence was absolute. I had no cash, no credit cards, and an empty refrigerator. But hunger was the last thing on my mind. Bradley had graciously handed me his exact itinerary. He was running straight to Mommy and Daddy. At the exclusive Oak Ridge Country Club. To plot my financial ruin. I went upstairs to the master bedroom. Took a quick shower to wash off the prison grit. And changed into a tailored charcoal suit I had left in the back of my closet. If I was going to war, I needed my armor. Since my accounts were frozen, I could not call another ride share. Fortunately, the spare keys to my vintage car were still hidden. Inside a hollowed-out dictionary. In my home office. Bradley never read a book in his life. So he never found them. The drive to the country club took 20 minutes. The valet looked shocked to see me, having undoubtedly heard the local gossip. But he took my keys without a word. I walked through the grand lobby. My heels clicking sharply against the polished marble floor. I knew exactly which private dining room the Mercers favored for their secretive meetings. The heavy, mahogany double doors of the Windsor room were closed. But I could hear Bradley whining from down the hallway. I pushed the doors wide open. The entire Mercer clan was seated around a long, elegant table, set with fine china and crystal glasses. Bradley sat at the head next to his mother Caroline. And his father Harold. Sienna was nowhere to be seen. Likely deemed too low class for an official family strategy meeting. The far end of the table sat Jasmine. My brother-in-law Derek's wife. Jasmine was a brilliant senior corporate auditor. And a stunning African-American woman. Who had always been treated with the same quiet, polite disdain by the Mercers as I had. She sat back in her chair. Gently swirling a glass of red wine. Looking thoroughly bored by Bradley's theatrics. Bradley was mid-sentence. Complaining about how traumatized he was. By my violent behavior. When his mother spotted me in the doorway. Caroline gasped loudly. And slammed her crystal water glass onto the table. How dare you show your face here? Caroline snapped. Her voice trembling with manufactured outrage. You have completely ruined my son's life. You belong in a cage, Gwen, not in polite society. Harold immediately chimed in, his face red with anger. You have a lot of nerve. Crashing a private family dinner. After what you did to Bradley and his unborn child. We are voting to remove you from the family trust board. Tonight you are a convicted criminal. And a permanent disgrace to the Mercer name. Bradley smirked from his seat. Crossing his arms confidently. Like a child hiding behind his parents. I told you she was unhinged, Mom. Security will be here in 2 minutes. To drag her out of the building. I walked slowly to the only empty chair in the room. Right across from Bradley, and pulled it out. I did not sit down. I simply leaned forward. Resting my hands flat on the mahogany table. Security is not coming. I said calmly, keeping my voice perfectly level. Because I am still a platinum member of this club. And unlike your son, I actually pay my annual dues on time. Caroline stood up. Pointing a manicured finger directly at my face. You are a monster, Gwen. You could not give Bradley a child. So you've violently destroyed his chance at happiness. With a younger, more fertile woman. You have always been cold, calculating and completely lacking in human empathy. We welcomed you into this prestigious family, and you repaid our kindness with violence and jealousy. I looked at Caroline, feeling absolutely no emotion toward her venomous words. The Mercers had always needed a scapegoat to cover up Bradley's glaring incompetence and moral failures. Whenever his risky investments failed, they blamed my lack of supportive wifey duties. Whenever he strayed and cheated, they blamed my long working hours as a forensic accountant. They painted me as the frigid career woman who forced their perfect golden boy into the arms of another woman. And now they were blaming me for a tragic miscarriage that never even happened. You are done in this town, Gwen Harold shouted, pounding his fist on the table. You will not get a single dime from the company or this family. Bradley is going to make sure you are left begging on the streets. I did not flinch. I just looked down the table and made brief eye contact with Jasmine. She raised an eyebrow slightly, an unspoken gesture of solidarity. The Mercers thought they had me completely surrounded and defeated. They had no idea I was about to drop a bomb that would shatter their perfect, wealthy facade into a million unrecoverable pieces. I reached into the inner pocket of my tailored charcoal blazer and pulled out a neatly folded stack of thick paper. The crisp sound of the documents unfolding echoed sharply in the sudden, heavy silence of the Windsor room. At the far end of the table, Jasmine leaned forward slightly. She set her crystal wine glass down on the mahogany table with a soft, deliberate clink. As a senior corporate auditor, Jasmine possessed a lethal eye for detail. She had spent years watching the Mercer family cover up their financial and moral bankruptcies with expensive lawyers and aggressive public relations campaigns. She knew the look of a woman who had come armed with indisputable facts for the first time all evening. The brilliant African-American woman looked genuinely entertained by the family dynamics. Bradley rolled his eyes dramatically and leaned back in his plush leather chair, crossing his arms defensively. What is that, Gwen? He sneered. More forged documents from your prison cell. Are you going to try and evict us from the country club? Now you are absolutely pathetic. You killed my unborn child. And now you are trying to terrorize my grieving family. In public, his mother, Caroline, pressed a manicured hand to her chest, letting out a theatrical sigh of distress. We do not want to see whatever deranged lies you have printed out, Gwen. The police report already confirmed. You pushed poor Sienna down the stairs in a jealous rage. You took away my first grandchild. You are sick. I slid the first document across the polished wood, directly toward Harold, who was sitting rigid at the head of the table. I suggest you put on your reading glasses, Harold. I said, my voice completely devoid of any emotion. Because as the chairman of the Mercer Family Trust, you are currently harboring a massive legal liability that could destroy your entire legacy. Harold frowned deeply, the deep wrinkles on his forehead pronouncing his sudden anxiety. He adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses and looked down at the paper. It was a certified medical record, complete with official hospital letterhead, stamped seals and physician signatures. What exactly am I looking at? Harold demanded, his voice gruff and impatient. You are looking at Sienna's surgical history. I explained clearly, making sure every single person in the room heard every syllable. Specifically a procedure she had done 5 years ago at a private boutique clinic in Miami, a bilateral tubal ligation. For those of you who do not understand medical terminology, it means she had her fallopian tubes surgically tied and cauterized. The room went entirely still. The ambient jazz music, playing softly through the ceiling speakers, suddenly sounded overwhelmingly loud. Bradley froze. His arrogant smirk vanished instantly, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated panic. He swallowed hard, his eyes darting frantically toward the documents. Resting on the table, the blood drained from his face, leaving him looking pale and sickly. "That is impossible," Caroline stammered, breaking the suffocating silence. Her hands trembled as she reached out to grab the papers from her husband. "Sienna was pregnant. We saw the ultrasound pictures. We bought expensive baby clothes. She was devastated when you pushed her." I let out a short, humorless laugh that cut through her delusion. Those ultrasound pictures were downloaded from a free stock image website. Caroline, I ran a simple reverse image search on them the day before Bradley had me arrested. Sienna was never pregnant. She physically cannot get pregnant. The entire pregnancy, and the subsequent tragic miscarriage, were a complete fabrication, designed to frame me for assault and get me out of the way, so Bradley could take unrestricted control of my financial assets. Jasmine let out a low appreciative whistle. She casually picked up the second page of the medical file and scanned it quickly. Her dark eyes gleamed with razor-sharp intelligence. "Well, this is incredibly thorough," Jasmine remarked, her voice smooth and dripping with delicious sarcasm. "It even includes the post-operative care instructions, signed by Sienna herself. I have to say, Bradley, your taste in women is just as fraudulent as your quarterly tax projections." Bradley slammed his fist onto the table, causing the expensive silverware to rattle violently. "That is a lie," he shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "She hacked those medical records. She paid someone to falsify them. This is a desperate attempt to ruin my reputation." "You ruined your own reputation, Bradley," I fired back, taking a deliberate step closer to the table. "You convinced a judge to throw me into a county jail for 30 days based on a fabricated medical emergency. You committed perjury. You filed a false police report. And you used your cheap mistress as the star witness in a federal criminal conspiracy." Harold looked up from the papers, his face turning an alarming shade of crimson. He looked at his son, and for the first time, I saw genuine doubt in the old patriarch's eyes. "Bradley, is this true?" Harold demanded, his voice dangerously low. "Did you fake a pregnancy to orchestrate an assault charge against your own wife?" Bradley scrambled blindly to maintain his collapsing web of lies. "Dad, you cannot possibly believe her. She is a convicted criminal. She is just trying to tear this family apart, out of spite." "No, Bradley," Jasmine interrupted smoothly, leaning back in her chair and crossing her arms with a satisfied smile. "She is just presenting the audit. And from where I am sitting, your books are completely cooked." Before anyone could react to Jasmine's biting remark, the heavy, mahogany doors of the Windsor room swung open again. Sienna stumbled inside, clutching her oversized designer handbag. She looked entirely out of place in the prestigious country club, her artificial spray tan contrasting sharply with her frantic, tear-stained face. She had clearly been waiting in the grand lobby after our little eviction party, and could no longer handle the suspense. "Brad, my credit card just declined at the luxury hotel you booked for us." Sienna whined loudly, completely oblivious to the suffocating tension currently filling the room. "You told me you transferred the funds this afternoon." Harold stood up, his imposing frame casting a long shadow over the mahogany table. He snatched the medical records from the wood and marched directly toward Sienna. He shoved the papers hard into her chest. "Is this true?" Harold barked, his voice echoing off the wood-paneled walls. Did you have a tubal ligation 5 years ago? Did you lie to this family about carrying my grandchild? Sienna looked down at the clinic letterhead. And her fake victim persona shattered into a million pieces. Her jaw dropped. And her eyes darted frantically around the room, looking for an exit. She looked at Bradley, but he was staring at the floor, completely paralyzed by his own cowardice. Sienna scrambled to spin a new web. She forced a loud, desperate sob. It was a miracle pregnancy, she cried, clutching Harold's arm. The doctors told me the surgery failed. They said it was a 1 in a million chance. I was pregnant. I swear to you. And she pushed me. She killed your miracle grandchild. A sharp ringing laugh cut through the dining room. It was Jasmine, the brilliant senior auditor, leaned her head back and laughed with genuine, unrestricted amusement. The sound was so jarring in the tense room that even Caroline stopped, clutching her pearl necklace. To stare a miracle pregnancy, Jasmine repeated, wiping a tear of mirth from her eye. That is your defense. You expect a room full of Ivy League educated asset managers to believe you are the Virgin Mary of Miami. Jasmine pushed her chair back and stood up, smoothing her impeccably tailored designer dress. She walked slowly around the table, her heels clicking with absolute authority. She stopped right behind her husband Derek, who was shrinking in his seat, and looked directly at Harold and Caroline. You know what is truly hilarious about this family? Jasmine said, her voice dripping with cold, calculated disdain. For 5 years you have looked down on me. You smiled to my face, but I heard the whispers. You thought because I am an African American woman who grew up in a working-class neighborhood, I was somehow beneath the prestigious Mercer bloodline. You scrutinized my audit reports. You questioned my corporate promotions. And you made sure I always felt like an outsider. At these little country club dinners. Jasmine pointed a manicured finger directly at Sienna, who was still trembling by the door. Yet you welcomed this cheap, transparent grifter into your home with open arms. Simply because she stroked your son's fragile ego. You handed her your credit cards and bought her expensive jewelry without running a basic background check. You let a 28-year-old amateur con artist play you for absolute fools. Caroline gasped, her face turning bright red. Jasmine, how dare you speak to us this way? We are your family. No, Caroline, you are not my family. Jasmine fired back, her tone razor sharp. You are a liability. I am a senior corporate auditor. I deal in facts, risk assessment and structural integrity. And this family is structurally bankrupt. Jasmine walked away from her husband and came to stand directly beside me. She crossed her arms, standing shoulder to shoulder with me, in a united front. Gwen is the only person in this entire room with a shred of actual intelligence, Jasmine declared, looking down at the seated Mercers. She spent 30 days in a concrete cell, while you all drank champagne and celebrated her downfall. But while you were busy patting yourselves on the back, she was dismantling your entire foundation. She did not just bring medical records tonight. She brought a mirror, and you all look utterly pathetic. Bradley finally found his voice, jumping up from his chair. You are both crazy. You cannot prove anything. Tomorrow morning my company goes public on Wall Street. I am going to ring that bell and become a half-billionaire. I do not need any of you. Jasmine smiled a predatory grin that made Bradley instinctively take a step back. Oh, Bradley, she purred softly. I have seen your internal ledgers. Tomorrow is going to be a very big day for you indeed. Bradley's face contorted into a mask of pure rage. He slammed both hands onto the mahogany table, leaning aggressively toward Jasmine. You do not know anything about my ledgers. He spat, his voice trembling with a mixture of fury and hidden terror. You are just a bitter woman who married into this family and never measured up to our high standards. You are bluffing. Derek, Jasmine's husband, finally found a shred of courage and stood up from his chair. Do not speak to my wife that way, Bradley. Sit down. Derek, Jasmine commanded without even looking at him. Derek instantly sat back down, looking thoroughly defeated. Jasmine kept her dark eyes fixed entirely on Bradley, her predatory smile never faltering. I do not need to bluff, Bradley. Numbers always tell a story, and your story is a massive financial tragedy, waiting for a public audience. Bradley scoffed, waving his hand dismissively at Jasmine. Before turning his venomous glare back to me, he straightened his tailored suit jacket and reached into his inner breast pocket. He pulled out a thick legally bound document. He threw it onto the table, sending it sliding across the polished wood until it stopped right in front of me. You want to talk about facts, Gwen? He sneered, regaining his arrogant composure. Here is a fact for you. Tomorrow morning, I am standing on the VIP balcony at the New York Stock Exchange. I am ringing the opening bell. Mercer Asset Management is officially going public, with an initial valuation of $500 million. Harold leaned forward, looking momentarily distracted from the shocking medical records still sitting in front of him. $500 million, Bradley. You told the family board. The valuation was capping at $300 million. I secured emergency capital from a private equity firm in Dubai last week. Bradley bragged, not taking his eyes off me for a single second. We are completely oversubscribed. By tomorrow afternoon, I will have more liquid capital than this entire family has generated. In 3 generations, I will be a Wall Street titan. And you, Gwen, will not see a single penny of it. I looked down at the document resting near my hands. The bold print on the cover page read, Chief Financial Officer Termination and Equity Forfeiture Agreement. You built the financial architecture of the firm. Bradley continued, pacing slowly behind his expensive leather chair. You drafted the corporate shareholder agreements. Yourself, you insisted on inserting a strict morality and criminal conduct clause to protect the firm from rogue executives. Well, congratulations, Gwen. You completely played yourself. He stopped pacing and pointed a sharp, manicured finger directly at my face. You have a criminal record now. A violent misdemeanor conviction on your permanent file, under the exact corporate bylaws you wrote. The board of directors has the unilateral right to terminate your employment immediately. Furthermore, it triggers a forced buyout of your founder shares at a heavily discounted book value. We held the emergency board vote this morning while you were packing up your jail cell. It was unanimous. Caroline finally found her voice, a triumphant, cruel smile spreading across her face. Oh, Bradley, that is brilliant. She thought she could take your house, but you just took her entire life's work right out from under her. You are legally boxed out, Bradley said, his voice dripping with supreme condescension. Your equity is completely gone. Your career in the financial sector is permanently destroyed, because no reputable hedge fund will ever hire a convicted criminal to manage their money. You have a big, empty house that you cannot afford to maintain, and zero income. He pulled a sleek silver fountain pen from his pocket and tossed it onto the termination agreement. It clattered loudly against the quiet backdrop of the dining room. Sign the papers, Gwen, he demanded. If you sign them right now, I will authorize a severance payment of $50,000. It is enough to pay your property taxes for a few months, while you figure out how to sell the house. If you refuse, I will bury you in civil litigation for the next decade. I will hire the most aggressive corporate litigators in New York and drag this out until you are entirely bankrupt. and begging for a settlement. The Windsor room was silent again. The Mercer family watched me with hungry, anticipating eyes. They wanted to see me break. They wanted to see the brilliant, arrogant forensic accountant finally realize she had been completely outmaneuvered. Sienna, who was still standing by the heavy mahogany doors, let out a loud dramatic sigh of relief and crossed her arms, looking incredibly smug. Once again I stared at the silver pen, resting on the thick stack of legal paper. Bradley thought he had orchestrated an absolute masterstroke. He thought using my own legal frameworks against me was the ultimate poetic justice. He genuinely believed that securing my criminal conviction was the golden key to unlocking his $500 million windfall. He was so blinded by his own greed and narcissism that he failed to see the massive legal trap I had meticulously laid out for him. I did not touch the silver pen. I did not even look at the signature page. Instead, I placed my hand flat on the document and looked Bradley dead in the eyes. I did not touch the silver fountain pen resting on top of the agreement. Instead, I reached out and picked up the thick stack of paper. I did not look at the signature line on the front page. As a forensic accountant, I knew that the true danger of any contract was never printed in bold letters at the top. The danger was always buried deep in the addendums. I flipped past the first 10 pages. Ignoring Bradley's impatient sigh, he tapped his fingers aggressively against the mahogany table. "Just sign the document, Gwen," he snapped. "You are wasting everyone's time. We have to celebrate the launch, and you are ruining the evening." I did not answer him. My eyes scanned the dense blocks of legal jargon. On page 14, section 8, paragraph C, indemnification and historical liability assumption. I read the paragraph twice to ensure I was fully grasping the sheer audacity of his corporate lawyers. A cold smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. He did not just want to fire me. He wanted to use me as a human shield. I dropped the document back onto the table and pushed it precisely 2 inches away from me. "This is not a termination agreement, Bradley," I said, my voice echoing clearly across the silent dining room. "This is a suicide pact." Harold leaned forward, his heavy brow furrowing again. "What are you talking about, Gwen? It is a standard equity forfeiture. You are a convicted criminal. We cannot have you on the board." I looked directly at the old patriarch. "There is nothing standard about page 14, Harold. This specific clause states that, by accepting the $50,000 severance, I am also accepting full personal and legal liability for all corporate tax filings, audited financial statements, and offshore fund transfers, dating back for the last 5 years. It explicitly absolves the chief executive officer, meaning your son, and the board of directors, from any financial discrepancies. Prior to this current fiscal quarter," Caroline gasped, placing a hand over her mouth. But Bradley did not even flinch. His dark eyes remained fixed on me, burning with a ruthless intensity. "You were the chief financial officer." Gwen Bradley countered, his voice dangerously calm. "The numbers were your responsibility. If there are discrepancies, you are the one who has to answer for them." I let out a sharp laugh. "Do not insult my intelligence, Bradley. You and I both know my ledgers were pristine. But you could not launch a $500 million initial public offering on Wall Street with a contaminated book. The private equity underwriters from Dubai found something during their due diligence period. Did they not? They found the missing money, and they refused to underwrite the public launch unless you provided a legally binding document proving that the rogue accountant had been identified, terminated, and held entirely responsible for the missing funds." Bradley's jaw clenched. The muscles in his neck tightened visibly. I had hit the absolute center of the target. You orchestrated that entire fake assault with Sienna. I continued taking a step closer to him. You bribed a defense attorney to tank my case. And you locked me in a county jail for 30 days. Not because you were angry. Not because you loved your mistress. You did it because you needed a felony charge to trigger the morality clause. So you could force me out and make me the sole fall guy for your massive embezzlement scheme. Just hours before the opening bell, Bradley leaned across the table, closing the distance between us. His handsome face was twisted into an ugly, menacing sneer. You are going to sign that paper, Gwen. He whispered, his voice a venomous hiss that only the people closest to us could hear. You have absolutely no choice. You have no money. You have no allies. You are a convicted criminal with a frozen bank account. If you do not sign that paper right now, I will unleash a legal team that will drag you through civil courts. For the next 10 years, I will make sure the media brands you as a violent, jealous thief. I will take your house. I will take your car. I will make sure you never work in the financial sector. Again, you will starve on the streets. The room was dead silent. The heavy threat hung in the air, suffocating the space around us. Harold and Caroline watched with bated breath, waiting for me to shatter under the immense pressure of their sons' absolute power. They expected me to reach for the silver pen with trembling hands and sign my life away. Instead, I picked up the silver fountain pen and looked at it. It was a heavy, expensive Mont Blanc. I held it up to the light, examining the engraved initials on the side. Then I calmly dropped it into the half-full crystal glass of red wine, sitting in front of Bradley's empty plate. I am not signing anything, I stated, my voice radiating absolute certainty. Bradley stared at the ruined pen, sinking to the bottom of the wine glass. His face turned a dangerous shade of crimson. You are making the biggest mistake of your life, Gwen. You are finished. Bradley stared at the ruined silver pen, submerged in his glass of expensive Cabernet. The symbolism was obvious, and it pushed him over the edge. He slammed both hands onto the mahogany table and stood up so fast. His heavy leather chair tipped backward and crashed onto the floor. You arrogant witch! Bradley roared, his voice echoing violently through the Windsor room. You think you can walk in here and dictate the terms of your own surrender? I am giving you a lifeline. I am giving you $50,000 to walk away quietly. Without this deal, you are nothing but a disgraced felon with a mountain of legal debt. I buttoned my charcoal blazer, my movements slow and deliberate. I do not need your dirty money, Bradley, and I certainly do not need your permission to leave. You can tell your Dubai investors that your chief financial officer declined the severance package. You are going to have to find another scapegoat to take the fall for your missing millions. But I highly suggest you pack a bag for a non-extradition country before the opening bell rings tomorrow. I turned my back on him and began walking toward the heavy double doors. If you walk out that door, you are dead to this family. Harold bellowed from the head of the table. That is the best news I have heard all month. Harold, I replied without looking back. Wait for me, a sharp, confident voice rang out behind me. I paused at the doorway and turned around. Jasmine was standing up, smoothing down her designer dress. She picked up her clutch from the table and looked down at her husband Derek. Derek was staring at his empty dinner plate, entirely unwilling to defend his wife or confront his father. Are you seriously walking out on us? Jasmine, Caroline gasped, clutching her pearls. After everything we have done for you. Jasmine let out a dry, humorless laugh. What exactly have you done for me, Caroline? You made sure I sat at the far end of the table. Made sure I felt my skin color and my background. Every single time I walked into this country club. You tolerated me. Because I brought a senior corporate auditor salary into this family. But you never respected me. I am done playing the grateful outsider. To a family of financial frauds. Jasmine looked at Derek one last time. Have your lawyers call my lawyers, Derek. I am moving into a hotel tonight. With that, Jasmine turned on her heel and walked right past Bradley, leaving the entire Mercer family sitting in stunned, chaotic silence. She fell into step beside me, and together we walked out of the Windsor room, pushing the heavy mahogany doors shut behind us. We walked through the grand lobby of the country club, side by side, our heels clicking in unison against the marble floor. Neither of us spoke until we reached the valet stand. Outside, the crisp evening air felt incredibly refreshing. After the suffocating toxicity of the Mercer dinner, the valet brought my vintage car around first. Jasmine handed the attendant her ticket and turned to face me. She crossed her arms, her dark eyes shining with intense calculation. You know he is going to forge your signature on that termination agreement tonight, right? Jasmine said, her tone completely businesslike. He is desperate. The Dubai underwriters will pull out of the initial public offering tomorrow morning if they do not see your signed liability waiver. I leaned against the door of my car. I know he will try, but I already filed an emergency injunction with the state Financial Regulatory Board. This afternoon, any transfer of my founder equity requires my physical signature in front of a county judge. If he submits a forged document to the Securities and Exchange Commission tomorrow, he upgrades his crime from civil fraud to a federal felony. Jasmine smiled, a genuine wide smile that lit up her face. You really did spend your 30 days in jail planning his complete destruction. I am incredibly impressed, Gwen. I could not have done it without the inspiration he provided. I replied, returning her smile. But I only have pieces of the puzzle, Jasmine. I know he is hiding a massive deficit. I know he is using shell companies. But his corporate lawyers locked me out of the internal servers the day I was arrested. I cannot see where the money actually went. Jasmine took a step closer, lowering her voice so the valet attendants could not hear. I am a senior corporate auditor, Gwen. They locked your administrative access, but they forgot that my department still conducts the quarterly risk assessments for Mercer Asset Management. I have a backdoor login to his secure servers. I can see every single wire transfer, every offshore account, and every fake vendor invoice he created over the last 5 years. I looked at her, realizing the absolute gold mine she was offering me. Why are you helping me, Jasmine? If we expose him tomorrow, the firm collapses. Derek loses his trust fund. The Mercer family goes bankrupt because they deserve it. Jasmine stated, her voice hard and uncompromising. They built their entire empire on lies and stepping on people like us. I want out of this family, and I want to watch Bradley lose everything he values. You have the forensic accounting skills to piece the timeline together. I have the digital access to give you the raw data. Her car pulled up to the curb. Jasmine did not break eye contact. Let us go to your house, Gwen, Jasmine said, holding out her hand. We have a long night ahead of us. We are going to burn his empire to the ground. And we are going to do it together. I reached out and shook her hand, sealing our alliance. Let us go catch a thief, I said. We drove back up the winding mountain road in my vintage car. The night air was freezing, but the adrenaline pumping through my veins kept me entirely warm. When we pulled through the heavy, wrought iron gates of the estate, the $10 million house was completely pitch black. Bradley had threatened that I would not be able to pay the utility bills, but he had forgotten that The estate was equipped with an independent solar grid and a backup generator system I had installed myself. He could freeze my checking accounts, but he could not turn off my lights. I unlocked the massive oak front doors and led Jasmine straight down the main hallway toward my private home office. It was a large, soundproof room overlooking the dense pine trees, equipped with a heavy mahogany desk and a custom-built forensic accounting workstation. I flipped the master power switch. 3 large curved monitors flickered to life, casting a sharp blue glow across the dark room. Jasmine set her designer clutch on a leather armchair and immediately pulled a sleek, silver corporate laptop from her tote bag. She set it on the desk right next to my monitors and cracked her knuckles. I glanced at the digital clock on the wall. It was exactly 11 at night. The opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange would ring at 9:30 tomorrow morning. We had less than 11 hours to map out a financial fraud that Bradley had likely spent years burying under mountains of corporate red tape. I booted up my encrypted network. Bradley had his IT department lock my chief financial officer credentials. The moment I took my plea deal, I am completely locked out of the main database, I told Jasmine, pulling up a blank command terminal. If I try to force my way in using my old passwords, it will trigger an automated alert to his security team. Jasmine pulled a chair up to the desk and opened her laptop. Do not worry about your old passwords, she said, her dark eyes reflecting the light of the screen. Your husband is arrogant, but he is also incredibly lazy. When he locked you out, he only focused on the internal executive portal. He completely forgot about the external risk compliance gateways. She began typing rapidly, her fingers flying across the keyboard with practiced precision. As a senior corporate auditor for the external firm that handles Mercer Asset Management, I have a persistent administrative token. It is a backdoor designed to let auditors review quarterly ledgers without alerting the internal accounting staff. I can drop us directly into the primary server, and his IT guys will just think it is a scheduled, automated compliance sweep. A green loading bar appeared on Jasmine's screen. The room was silent, except for the rapid clicking of her keyboard and the low hum of the computer fans. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. If Bradley had somehow anticipated this and updated the firewall protocols, we would be entirely blind. A soft chime echoed from her laptop. Access granted flashed across the screen in bold, white letters. We are in, Jasmine announced, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. Welcome to the restricted servers of Mercer Asset Management. Every wire transfer, every hidden offshore account, and every fake vendor invoice is sitting right here. I immediately leaned forward, taking control of my 3 massive monitors and linking them to her access point. The sheer volume of data was staggering. Thousands of encrypted folders and millions of rows of financial transactions flooded the screens. An amateur would have spent months trying to make sense of the chaos. But Jasmine and I were not amateurs. We were apex predators in the corporate financial world. Ignore the domestic operational accounts, I instructed, my eyes scanning the directories. Look for the mezzanine funds and the international consulting expenditures. That is where guilty executives always hide their capital flight. We fell into a flawless rhythm. The synergy between the brilliant African-American senior auditor and the seasoned forensic accountant was absolute. Jasmine called out suspicious routing numbers and hidden IP addresses, while I cross-referenced them with international shell company registries. We did not need to speak much. We communicated through the universal language of numbers. At 1 in the morning I found the first major anomaly. A wire transfer for $12 million labeled as strategic consulting fees. Sent to a firm located in the Cayman Islands. I ran the tax identification number through a global database I maintained on my private server. It traced back to a post office box, registered under Sienna's maiden name. Got one, I said, pointing at the screen. 12 million parked in the Caribbean. Jasmine shook her head and pointed to another ledger on her laptop. Look deeper, Gwen. That is just a drop in the bucket. I just found a cluster of real estate acquisitions in Dubai, totaling over $40 million. The properties do not actually exist. They are phantom assets. The picture began to form rapidly. It was a classic Ponzi structure, but executed on a massive global scale. Bradley was taking new capital from wealthy investors, promising them high returns, and immediately funneling the cash into offshore shell companies to fund his lavish lifestyle and secure his escape fund. The balance sheets he had presented to the Dubai underwriters for tomorrow's initial public offering were completely fabricated. He was using inflated future projections to cover a massive black hole of missing money. The clock ticked past 2 in the morning. The magnitude of the embezzlement was staggering. It was not just $50 million. It was rapidly approaching $200 million. If Bradley managed to ring that bell tomorrow morning, he would successfully legitimize the stolen funds, cash out his fraudulent founder shares, and disappear on a private jet before the Securities and Exchange Commission even knew what hit them. We had to stop him. I pulled up a blank digital canvas on my center monitor and began building the master matrix. In forensic accounting, we call this the blood trail. When dealing with complex financial fraud, you do not just follow the money, you follow the behavioral patterns of the thief. Bradley was arrogant, and that arrogance left massive digital footprints all over the corporate server. Jasmine routed the raw data streams from her backdoor terminal directly into my analytical software. The numbers cascaded across my screens in chaotic waves, but my trained eyes quickly categorized them into a perfectly clear narrative. For the next 3 hours, the only sounds in my dark office were our measured breathing and the frantic clicking of our keyboards. Look at the third quarter ledgers from 2 years ago. I instructed, pointing to a massive red spike on my secondary monitor. Bradley brought in $60 million from a private pension fund based in Ohio. But the money never actually hit the domestic trading floor. Jasmine pulled up the corresponding transaction hashes on her laptop. He washed the capital through 3 different intermediary banks in Switzerland before dropping it into a corporate entity called Horizon Zenith Limited. Horizon Zenith is registered in the Cayman Islands. I cross-referenced the International Corporate Registry database. The listed director for Horizon Zenith was an obscure local law firm, but the authorized signatory on the bank accounts was Bradley himself. The puzzle pieces were snapping together with terrifying speed. He was running a textbook Ponzi scheme. Whenever his high-risk domestic trades lost money, he covered the massive losses by aggressively soliciting new investments. But instead of just covering the margins, he started skimming heavily off the top. And the skimming accelerated exponentially the moment he met his young mistress. Pull up the expenditure logs for Horizon Zenith, I told Jasmine. Let us see exactly what this fake consulting firm was actually buying. Jasmine typed in the query, and a massive spreadsheet populated her screen. We both leaned in to read the itemized list. The sheer audacity of the spending was nauseating. There were no consulting fees or market research reports. The entire offshore account was a private piggy bank, dedicated exclusively to funding their lavish lifestyle. Here is an invoice for a $2 million yacht charter in Monaco from last summer. Jasmine read aloud, her voice tight with disgust. And another one for a private jet lease to Paris. $600,000 spent at luxury boutiques in Milan over a single weekend. I scrolled further down the list, my anger hardening into cold, unbreakable resolve. I found a string of recurring payments to the boutique medical clinic in Miami, the exact same clinic where Sienna had her tubal ligation. Bradley had used stolen investor money to pay for the medical procedure that would eventually serve as the foundation for my false arrest. He had financed my personal destruction using other people's hard-earned life savings. The total deficit is astronomical, I said, highlighting the final cell on the spreadsheet. $198 million. He has stolen almost $200 million from his own clients over the last 40 months. Jasmine sat back in her chair, rubbing her tired eyes. The initial public offering is his ultimate exit strategy. He knows the Ponzi structure is completely unsustainable. He cannot keep raising new private capital to cover the old losses forever. The bubble is about to burst spectacularly. Exactly, I nodded, saving the master file to an encrypted external drive. He artificially inflated the value of Mercer Asset Management to $500 million. Tomorrow morning, the moment the opening bell rings, he is going to sell his founder shares to unsuspecting retail investors. He will pocket hundreds of millions of dollars in clean, legitimate cash. Then he and Sienna will board a private flight to a non-extradition country, leaving the firm to collapse and leaving me holding the bag. As the former chief financial officer, it was the perfect financial crime. Or at least it would have been, if he had not underestimated the woman he married. He assumed my analytical skills were limited to the boundaries he set for me. He assumed a 30-day stint in county lockup would break my spirit and leave me too terrified to fight back. Instead, it had given me the absolute clarity required to dissect his entire life. Jasmine pointed to the digital clock on the wall. It was 4 a.m. The sun would be rising over the Colorado mountains. Soon we have the entire data package, Gwen. Every wire transfer, every fake invoice, and the complete Cayman Islands registry. But having the data is not enough. We cannot just walk into the stock exchange and hand this to a security guard. Bradley has an army of corporate lawyers ready to shut us down. The moment we step off the elevator, I unplugged the encrypted drive and dropped it into my blazer pocket. I know, Jasmine. We do not need a security guard. We need federal agents. I opened the bottom drawer of my mahogany desk and pushed aside a stack of heavy tax code manuals. Hidden in the false bottom was an encrypted satellite phone. Jasmine raised an eyebrow as I powered the device on. Because of the inherent dangers of my profession, I maintained a direct, encrypted line to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Specifically, the White Collar Crime Division in New York. I punched in a 12-digit sequence. The line did not ring. It simply connected to a secure dispatch operator. I requested Special Agent Nathan Cross. Using my clearance code, I had worked with Nathan previously, dismantling a corrupt pharmaceutical syndicate. He was a ruthless investigator who despised corporate thieves. It took 40 seconds for Nathan to pick up Gwen. He said, his voice thick with sleep. It is the middle of the night. You just got out of county lockup yesterday morning. Please tell me. You are not calling to confess to a parole violation. I am calling to hand you the biggest bust of your entire career. Nathan, I replied, my voice completely steady. I need a tactical raid team at the New York Stock Exchange and the adjacent Manhattan Hotel ballroom. By 9 o'clock Eastern Time this morning, the line went completely silent. I could hear the rustle of sheets as he sat up. Explain, he demanded, his tone instantly shifting from tired to absolute professional focus. My husband, Bradley Mercer, is ringing the opening bell for the Mercer Asset Management initial public offering. I explained. He submitted fraudulent valuations to the underwriters. He is running a massive Ponzi structure. I have the complete digital paper trail, proving he funneled $198 million of investor capital into offshore Cayman Island accounts. He plans to dump his founder shares, pocket the cash and board a private jet before lunch. Are you absolutely sure about the offshore accounts? Nathan asked. The Securities and Exchange Commission will not authorize a raid on the stock exchange without concrete proof. If we get this wrong, the resulting lawsuits will bankrupt the federal government. I have the raw server logs right in front of me. I confirmed I have the fake vendor invoices, the wire routing numbers, and the shell company registry documents. My colleague is a senior corporate auditor who bypassed their internal firewalls. We are ready to transmit the entire data package to your secure server right now. Jasmine did not wait for an invitation. She was already typing rapidly, redirecting the encrypted files through a masked proxy network to avoid detection. I am sending the files, Nathan, I said, watching the progress bar race across the screen. I hear the ping on my terminal. Nathan replied, give me 5 minutes to authenticate these ledgers. Keep the line open. Jasmine and I sat in silence, watching the digital clock on the wall tick forward. Exactly 5 minutes later Nathan came back on the line. The background noise had completely changed. I could hear shouting and the heavy clatter of keyboards. He had woken up the entire division. Gwen, this is a bloodbath, Nathan said, his voice tight with adrenaline. These ledgers are devastating. The United States Attorney is waking up a judge right now to sign the arrest warrants for wire fraud and embezzlement. I am coordinating directly with the Securities and Exchange Commission. They are drafting an emergency order to halt all trading on the Mercer ticker symbol the exact second the bell rings. Can you get your agents inside the building? I asked. Bradley hired a private security firm for the launch. They will have the VIP balcony locked down tight. They can try to lock it down, Nathan countered coldly. But I am bringing 20 armed federal agents. I'm going to secure the exits, storm the balcony, and place Bradley Mercer in federal custody. On live television. I need you and your auditor to be there, Gwen. You know the ledgers better than my analysts do. I need you on site to point out exactly which laptops and hard drives my agents need to seize before his accomplices try to wipe the network. We are in Colorado, I noted, checking the time. But I have a private charter waiting at the local airstrip. We can be wheels up in 20 minutes and land at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey. By 8 I will have a federal transport waiting to rush you into Manhattan, Nathan promised. Do not be late. I terminated the encrypted call and placed the heavy phone back into the hidden drawer. I looked at Jasmine, who was already shutting down her secure laptop. The trap was officially set. Let us go to New York, I said. We have a billionaire to destroy. I grabbed my leather overnight bag from the closet, while Jasmine began wiping down the forensic workstation. We needed to leave for the private airstrip within the next 10 minutes to ensure we landed in New Jersey before the morning rush hour. The adrenaline was still humming through my veins. The trap was perfectly constructed, and all we had to do was fly to New York and pull the trigger. Suddenly a harsh electronic buzz echoed through the silent house. I froze, my hand resting on the zipper of my bag. It was the perimeter security system. Someone was at the front gate. I walked quickly over to the master control panel, mounted on the wall, and tapped the screen to bring up the exterior camera feeds. A black town car was idling in the driveway, just outside the wrought iron gates. A woman was standing under the harsh glare of the security floodlights, wrapping a thick trench coat tightly around her shoulders. She was frantically pressing the intercom button and looking over her shoulder, as if she expected someone to be following her. It was Sienna. Jasmine walked up behind me and looked at the glowing monitor. "What on earth is she doing here at 4 in the morning?" Jasmine whispered, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Bradley would never let her come here alone." "Bradley does not know she is here," I replied, analyzing Sienna's erratic body language. "Look at her, she is terrified. He is probably at his luxury hotel right now, hyperventilating over the Dubai underwriting documents." And she panicked. "Let her in." I pressed the release button. The heavy iron gate slowly swung open. Sienna ran back to the town car, spoke briefly to the driver, and then hurried up the long winding driveway on foot. "Stay out of sight," I instructed Jasmine, pointing toward the darkened hallway leading to the kitchen. "But keep your phone ready." I walked to the front foyer and pulled open the heavy oak doors. Just as Sienna reached the top step, she looked absolutely nothing like the arrogant, smug mistress who had mocked me by the pool just 12 hours earlier. Her spray tan looked uneven under the porch lights. Her hair was messy, and her eyes were bloodshot from crying or lack of sleep. "Gwen, please let me come inside," Sienna practically begged, her voice trembling in the freezing mountain air. "I have to talk to you before Bradley realizes." I left the hotel. I did not step aside immediately. I kept my posture rigid, blocking the threshold. "You have a lot of nerve. Showing up at my house in the middle of the night. Sienna, give me one good reason why I should not trigger the silent alarm and have the county sheriff drag you away for trespassing again. Because I brought you money," Sienna blurted out, clutching her designer handbag tightly against her chest. "Real money, Gwen. Not the $50,000 Bradley offered you at the country club. Please just give me 5 minutes." I stared at her for a long moment, letting the absolute desperation of her situation wash over me. Then I took a single step back and gestured for her to enter. Sienna rushed into the grand foyer, shivering violently as the warm air of the house hit her. I closed the front doors, but I did not offer to take her coat. "You have exactly 5 minutes," I stated coldly, crossing my arms. Sienna unzipped her handbag with shaking hands. She reached inside and pulled out a crisp, rectangular piece of paper. She held it out toward me. It was a certified cashier check, drawn from a local domestic bank. "It is for $100,000. Sienna said, her voice desperate and pleading. "It is clean money, Gwen. It is from my personal account. Take it and disappear." I did not reach for the check. I just looked at the printed numbers, and then looked back up at her frightened face. You came all the way up this mountain, in the middle of the night, to offer me $100,000, to walk away from my own company." "Yes," Sienna nodded frantically. "You just have to sign that chief financial officer termination agreement Bradley gave you tonight. Sign it, pack your bags and leave the state. Do not fight the board of directors. Do not contact the Securities and Exchange Commission. Just let the initial public offering happen smoothly. Tomorrow morning. You know as well as I do that Bradley has the power to ruin you. If you refuse, this is your only way out with any cash at all. I am trying to help both of us survive this nightmare. And why would you care about the public launch?" I asked, tilting my head slightly. "Unless you know that the company valuation is completely fake." Sienna swallowed hard. her eyes darting nervously around the empty foyer. She was cornered. And her panic was overriding her common sense. Bradley told me. You refused to sign the liability waiver. She whispered, her voice cracking. He is losing his mind, Gwen. He told me that if the underwriters back out tomorrow, the entire fund collapses. And the federal regulators will start digging into the Cayman Island transfers. I maintained my blank expression, masking the surge of victory I felt. She had just verbally confirmed her absolute knowledge of the international embezzlement scheme. I know he took the money, Sienna continued, tears finally spilling over her eyelashes. I know about the missing millions. But if the public launch goes through tomorrow, we get enough clean cash to cover our tracks and leave the country. If you ruin this for us, Bradley goes to prison and I lose everything. I will be an accessory. Please, Gwen, just take the check. I looked at the cashier check trembling in her hand. $100,000. To a woman who had just spent 30 days in a concrete cell. It might have looked like absolute salvation. To a forensic accountant who had just traced almost $200 million to the Cayman Islands. It looked like a pathetic insult. I did not reach for the piece of paper. Instead, I took a slow, deliberate step forward, forcing Sienna to instinctively back up until her shoulders hit the heavy oak doors of the grand foyer. You want me to take $100,000 while Bradley walks away with hundreds of millions? I said, my voice dangerously calm. That is terrible math, Sienna. Sienna shook her head frantically, her messy hair falling across her tear-stained face. It is all the liquid cash I have access to. Gwen, Bradley controls the rest of the accounts. Just sign the termination paper. If the Dubai investors find out the valuation is fake, they will pull the funding. The Securities and Exchange Commission will immediately audit the firm, and we will all be ruined. Just take the money and let us go. I needed her to explicitly state the flight risk for the federal agents. I crossed my arms, projecting deep skepticism. Let us be logical for a second. If he rings that opening bell at 9:30, he gets the capital injection. Then what, he just walks out of the stock exchange and hails a cab to the airport. What makes you think this plan will actually work? It is foolproof, Sienna said quickly, desperate to prove she was on the inside of the conspiracy. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a frantic whisper. He has a private helicopter waiting at the VIP helipad on the East River. It is scheduled for exactly 10:15. It takes us straight to Teterboro Airport in New Jersey. The private jet is already fueled and filed for a flight path to Dubai. And then we have a private transfer to the Maldives. There is no extradition treaty there, Gwen. He has it all planned out perfectly. We just need you to sign the liability waiver, so the underwriters release the funds. At the opening bell, I let her words hang in the freezing air of the foyer. I repeated softly, tilting my head. You actually think there is a we in this scenario? What do you mean? Sienna asked, her brow furrowing in confusion. I let out a short, cold laugh that made her flinch. Bradley is a malignant narcissist who just framed his own wife for a violent felony, simply to save his own skin. I explained, my voice devoid of any sympathy. Do you really believe he is going to take a 28-year-old liability with him to the Maldives? The moment that investor money hits the offshore accounts, you become entirely deadweight. He is not taking you on that helicopter, Sienna. You are lying. Sienna shouted, her voice cracking with fresh panic. He loves me. We chose the house in the Maldives together. He loves the fact that you are too stupid to realize. You are the perfect scapegoat. I countered, stepping even closer. Let me ask you a question. Who signed the intake forms at the Miami clinic for the fake miscarriage? Sienna swallowed hard, her eyes widening. I did, she whispered. He said it had to be in my name for the insurance. And who is the registered owner of the post office box? In the Cayman Islands. I continued, relentlessly pressing my psychological advantage. I saw the server ledgers tonight, Sienna. He put your maiden name on the Horizon Zenith offshore accounts. Do you remember signing those corporate director agreements? He said it was just for tax purposes. Sienna stammered, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. It was for prison purposes, I corrected sharply. He used your name to set up the shell companies. When the federal regulators come looking for the missing $198 million, they are going to follow the digital paper trail straight to you. He is going to leave you sitting in that Manhattan hotel room while he boards that flight alone. And when the FBI raids the suite, they will find you holding the bag, just like he tried to do to me. Sienna dropped the cashier check. It fluttered to the marble floor, landing between my shoes. Her face went completely ashen, all the remaining color draining away. The illusion of her glamorous escape had just been brutally shattered against the hard concrete of reality. She finally realized the terrifying depth of the legal trap she was in. She was not the mastermind's partner. She was the decoy. Pick up your dirty money and get out of my house, I commanded, my voice echoing with absolute finality. And if I were you, I would not go back to that hotel. I would start running right now. Sienna let out a choked sob. She scrambled to the floor, snatched the check with shaking hands, and yanked the front door open. She ran blindly down the dark driveway, disappearing into the freezing night. The moment the heavy gates clicked shut, Jasmine stepped out. From the dark shadows of the kitchen hallway, she held up her smartphone. The screen, displaying an active audio recording application, got every single word Jasmine said, a massive triumphant grin spreading across her face. We have the helicopter schedule, the airport location, and the explicit flight risk confirmation. I picked up my overnight bag from the floor. Send that audio file directly to Agent Cross, I said. Then let us get to the airstrip. It is time to go ring a bell. The private charter cut through the dark sky above the Midwest. Jasmine and I barely slept. We spent the 2-hour flight reviewing the encrypted ledgers one final time to ensure our presentation was flawless. When the sun began to rise over the Pennsylvania border, it painted the cabin in sharp streaks of gold. It was a new day. The day my husband would lose his entire world. We touched down at Teterboro Airport exactly at 8:00 in the morning. A sleek black government transport vehicle was idling on the tarmac, waiting for us. Special Agent Nathan Cross was sitting in the passenger seat. He looked exactly as I remembered him. Sharp-focused and entirely devoid of humor. He handed me a thick tactical dossier. As soon as we closed the heavy doors, the Securities and Exchange Commission has drafted the emergency injunction. Cross confirmed. As the vehicle sped toward the George Washington Bridge, they are monitoring the pre-market trading data. Right now, the moment Bradley touches that opening bell at 9:30, they will completely lock the ticker symbol. Not a single share will be traded on the open market. We arrived at a secure federal staging area, just 2 blocks away from the 5-star Manhattan Hotel, where Bradley was hosting his lavish launch party. Jasmine and I used a private room to change into the clothes we had specifically packed for this exact moment. We were not walking into that ballroom looking like victims of a tragic family dispute. We were walking in as financial executioners. I put on a tailored crimson power suit with a sharp lapel. It was the color of absolute authority and warning. Jasmine wore a striking emerald green suit, that complemented her rich dark skin perfectly and radiated corporate dominance. We checked our reflections in the mirror. We looked like two women who owned the entire city. Cross met us in the hallway outside the dressing room, adjusting his earpiece. "The perimeter is fully secure," Cross announced, looking us up and down. With a nod of professional approval. "I have 20 agents positioned at every ballroom exit, dressed as catering staff and private security personnel. Another tactical team is currently sitting in unmarked vehicles at the East River helipad, waiting for the pilot to arrive. The private jet at Teterboro has been permanently grounded by the Federal Aviation Administration." "What about Sienna?" Jasmine asked, checking her heavy designer watch. Cross pulled up a live surveillance feed on his tactical tablet. "She never went back to his hotel suite. She booked a commercial flight to Miami under a fake name. But my agents pulled her off the boarding bridge 20 minutes ago. She is currently sitting in a federal holding room, crying her eyes out and asking for a plea deal. Bradley has absolutely no idea she is gone. He thinks she is just running late for the red carpet photos." It was 9:15. We walked the 2 blocks to the hotel, surrounded by a tight formation of plainclothes federal agents. The streets of Manhattan were bustling with morning traffic, completely unaware of the massive financial explosion about to detonate inside the towering glass building ahead of us. We entered the hotel through a secure service elevator, bypassing the aggressive paparazzi and financial journalists swarming the grand lobby. We stepped out onto the shadowed mezzanine level, directly overlooking the massive main ballroom. Through the glass double doors, I could see hundreds of wealthy investors mingling under massive crystal chandeliers. There was a grand stage set up at the front, featuring a giant digital screen displaying the Mercer Asset Management logo, and a bright red countdown clock, ticking down to the opening bell. And there he was. Bradley was standing near the front row, wearing a custom-tailored tuxedo, looking incredibly handsome and completely invincible. He was shaking hands with the wealthy Dubai underwriters, flashing his trademark charismatic smile. He was exactly 10 minutes away from pulling off the greatest heist of his life and vanishing into the clouds. Cross unholstered his heavy radio. "All units hold your positions," he whispered into the microphone. His eyes locked on Bradley. "We wait for the target to take the stage. Do not move a muscle until he attempts to initiate the public offering." I stood next to Jasmine, watching the digital countdown clock tick away the final seconds of Bradley's freedom. The trap was perfectly armed. The exits were sealed. There was no escape route left. I reached into my pocket and touched the encrypted flash drive containing the evidence of his stolen $200 million. The time for hiding in the shadows was over. It was time to ring the bell. The grand ballroom of the Manhattan Hotel was a monument to corporate hubris. From our vantage point on the shadowed mezzanine, Jasmine and I had a perfect view of the entire spectacle. Bradley had spared absolutely no expense for his launch party, using the stolen investor funds to create an illusion of infinite wealth. Massive crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow over the room. Waiters in pristine white tuxedos circulated through the crowd, carrying silver trays loaded with vintage champagne and imported caviar. At the center of the room stood an enormous ice sculpture, carved into the shape of a bull, the universal symbol of a rising financial market. It was a masterclass in psychological manipulation. Bradley knew that wealthy investors were drawn to the scent of success by throwing the most extravagant party of the year. He was signaling to the Dubai underwriters and the Wall Street elite that Mercer Asset management was a financial juggernaut. The room was packed with hundreds of people. Financial journalists, with flashing cameras, were crowded near the front stage, jostling for the best angle. Bradley was standing, right in the middle of the media frenzy, entirely in his element. He was wearing a custom-tailored tuxedo that easily cost $10,000. He flashed his brilliant, charismatic smile for the cameras, shaking hands with the lead underwriters, and projecting the image of a visionary chief executive officer. Every few minutes, I watched him casually glance at his expensive watch, and then look toward the main entrance. He was waiting for Sienna to arrive, for the red carpet photos. He frowned slightly, clearly annoyed by her absence. But his monumental ego quickly pushed the concern aside. He was just minutes away from securing $500 million. He was not going to let a tardy mistress ruin his moment of absolute triumph. I shifted my gaze to the front row of VIP tables, right below the main stage. The entire Mercer family was seated there, looking incredibly smug. Harold was leaning back in his chair, smoking an expensive cigar. Despite the hotel regulations, Caroline was wearing a new diamond necklace, laughing loudly with the wives of the board members. They were celebrating their absolute victory. They believed they had successfully expelled the difficult daughter-in-law, stripped me of my equity, and secured their family legacy for the next century. They looked so comfortable in their arrogance, completely oblivious to the invisible net tightening around them. "Look at the exits," Jasmine whispered, leaning close to me, so her voice would not carry over the balcony. I scanned the perimeter of the ballroom. Special Agent Nathan Cross had orchestrated a flawless infiltration. I could spot at least a dozen federal agents, seamlessly blended into the environment. A man dressed as a catering manager was standing near the kitchen doors, subtly adjusting the earpiece. Hidden beneath his collar, two agents disguised as private event security had quietly locked the heavy brass deadbolts on the rear emergency exits. The ballroom was completely sealed. Nobody was getting out. The giant digital screen behind the stage flashed brightly. The Mercer Asset Management logo faded away, replaced by a massive red countdown clock. 5 minutes to the opening bell. The low murmur of the crowd began to rise, turning into an excited roar. This was the moment the financial world had been waiting for. Bradley broke away from the press pool and walked up the short steps to the main stage. The crowd erupted into applause. Harold stood up from his VIP table and cheered loudly, raising his champagne glass high in the air. Bradley walked over to the sleek glass podium, tapping the microphone twice. The sharp sound echoed through the ballroom, immediately silencing the chatter of the investors. "Welcome everyone," Bradley began, his voice smooth and incredibly persuasive. "Today is not just a milestone for Mercer Asset Management. Today is a testament to resilience, vision, and the unwavering support of family. We have built something truly extraordinary here, a financial institution that values integrity, transparency, and aggressive growth." I almost laughed out loud at the word transparency. He was standing in front of hundreds of people, spinning a web of absolute lies, while secretly planning his escape route to the Maldives. "It has been a challenging year on a personal level," Bradley continued, expertly, shifting his tone to sound humbled and vulnerable. "As many of you know, my family recently endured a tragic loss. But through that darkness, we found the strength to push forward. We purged the negative elements from our lives and focused entirely on the future. And looking out at all of you today, I can confidently say that the future is brighter than ever." The crowd murmured in sympathetic agreement. Caroline dabbed her eyes with a silk handkerchief, playing the role of the grieving mother to perfection. It was sickening. They were monetising a fake tragedy to sell fraudulent shares. "It is time to go down," I said, my voice cold and steady. "I am not watching this from the shadows." Jasmine nodded, her dark eyes shining with anticipation. "Let us go. Give the Mercer family the audit of a lifetime," she replied. We turned away from the mezzanine railing and walked toward the grand, sweeping staircase that led directly down to the main ballroom floor. My crimson power suit caught the light of the chandeliers. As we descended the carpeted steps, we moved with deliberate synchronized purpose. A few guests standing near the base of the staircase turned their heads as we approached. Their expressions shifted from polite curiosity to absolute shock as they recognized who I was. The disgraced ex-wife, the convicted criminal, the woman who was supposed to be hiding in a cheap motel. Whispers began to ripple through the back of the room, but the sound was completely drowned out by Bradley's booming voice over the sound system. The countdown clock on the main screen shifted to 4 minutes. The trap was armed. The exits were secured, and the federal agents were waiting for my signal. I kept my hand firmly in my pocket, gripping the encrypted flash drive that held the key to Bradley's destruction. Bradley gripped the edges of the sleek glass podium. The massive crystal chandeliers reflected in his dark eyes as he surveyed the silent ballroom. He took a slow, deep breath, performing the role of the humble visionary with absolute perfection. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice resonating with manufactured emotion. "When I founded Mercer Asset Management, I had a simple philosophy. Wealth is not just numbers on a spreadsheet. It is about trust. It is about securing a legacy for our children and building a foundation of absolute integrity. We are not just a company. We are a family." A gentle wave of applause rippled through the crowd. I stood near the back of the ballroom beside Jasmine, listening to the absolute garbage pouring from his mouth. He was talking about integrity, while his offshore Cayman accounts were actively bleeding. These same investors dry. But as many of you know, building a legacy is rarely a smooth path. Bradley continued, lowering his voice to a solemn whisper. "Over the past few weeks, my family and I have faced unimaginable darkness. We survived a harrowing ordeal of domestic violence, perpetrated by someone I once trusted. My former wife, driven by senseless jealousy, sought to destroy everything I built. She attacked my partner. She caused the tragic loss of our unborn child." Gasps echoed from the investors standing near the stage. Caroline Mercer raised her silk handkerchief to her face, wiping away non-existent tears. Harold patted his wife on the shoulder, looking fiercely protective. Bradley paused, letting the heavy silence amplify his manufactured trauma. There were days when the grief was completely overwhelming. Bradley said, gripping the podium tighter. "There were nights when I thought about walking away from all of this. But then I looked at the incredible team at Mercer Asset Management. I looked at the unwavering support of my parents. And I looked at all of you, the partners who placed your faith in my vision. I realized that giving up was not an option. I had to turn that pain into purpose. I had to protect this family." The sheer sociopathy required to deliver that speech was staggering. He was weaponizing a fake miscarriage and my false imprisonment to secure their capital. He was using me as a sacrificial lamb to sanctify his own greed. "And that brings us to this exact moment," Bradley declared, his voice rising with triumphant energy. "We did not just survive the storm, we conquered it. Today, we launch an entirely new era of financial supremacy. The private equity we secured this week pushed our initial valuation to an unprecedented $500 million. We are opening the market with the strongest balance sheet in the history of our sector. We are stepping into a golden future. And I am honored to share this wealth with every person. In this room, the ballroom erupted. The venture capitalists and Wall Street executives cheered wildly, raising their champagne glasses in a massive toast to the golden boy of finance. Camera flashes fired like strobe lights, illuminating his handsome, smiling face. I glanced up at the giant digital screen behind him. The red countdown clock shifted to exactly 2 minutes. Jasmine leaned closer to me, her dark eyes burning with fierce anticipation. "He is putting on the performance of a lifetime," she whispered. "I almost feel bad that we are about to completely ruin the ending. For him, do not feel bad," I replied, keeping my eyes locked on Bradley. "He wrote his own script. I am just providing the plot twist." On the stage, Bradley gestured toward the front row. "I want to invite the lead partners from our Dubai underwriting firm to join me up here for the official bell-ringing ceremony," he announced over the roaring crowd. 4 men in tailored suits walked up the short stairs, joining Bradley behind the podium. They shook hands, smiling for the rapid-fire press photos. Bradley checked his designer watch, a smug, satisfied grin settling permanently onto his face. He thought the finish line was just seconds away. He thought he successfully manipulated hundreds of elite financial minds. I took a deep breath and stepped out. From the shadows of the mezzanine staircase, I began walking straight down the center aisle of the massive ballroom, cutting a deliberate path directly through the crowd of loudly cheering investors. Jasmine walked perfectly and stepped beside me, projecting absolute confidence. My crimson power suit stood out like a stark warning beacon in the endless sea of dark, conservative tuxedos. We did not stop. We did not hesitate. We marched toward the grand stage with the cold, unstoppable momentum of a looming avalanche. Behind Bradley, the giant digital countdown clock flashed to exactly 1 minute. We walked past the front row of VIP tables. Harold Mercer was the first to notice us. He was mid-laugh holding a crystal champagne flute, but the sound died in his throat. The second he saw my crimson power suit, he dropped his glass. It shattered against the polished marble floor, spilling expensive vintage champagne everywhere. Caroline followed his gaze, and her jaw fell open in absolute horror. She desperately grabbed her husband's arm, realizing that the nightmare they thought they had buried was standing right in front of them. I did not even look at them. My eyes were fixed on the audiovisual control booth, located just off the right side of the main stage. The tech director was frantically typing on his keyboard, trying to cue up the final celebratory graphics. Jasmine did not need to plug anything in. She had already linked her backdoor access token directly to the hotel wireless presentation network. Using her smartphone, we stopped directly at the base of the stage, just a few feet away from where Bradley was standing. Jasmine looked at her phone, smiled and pressed a single button. The giant digital countdown clock behind Bradley froze. At exactly 42 seconds, the bright red numbers flickered violently. And then, the entire massive screen went completely black. A loud, sharp burst of electronic static echoed through the ballroom sound system, cutting off Bradley, who was just preparing to invite the Dubai underwriters to place their hands on the ceremonial bell. Bradley let out a frustrated sigh and tapped his microphone. "Can we get the tech team to fix the visual feed?" he asked, smoothly projecting calm authority to his investors. "We want the logo shining bright for the official photos." But the tech team was not in control anymore. The massive presentation screen flashed back to life. In blinding high definition. It did not show the Mercer Asset Management logo. Instead it displayed a sprawling, meticulously organized corporate spreadsheet. It was the master forensic ledger Jasmine and I had built in my dark home office. Just hours earlier. The font was massive, ensuring that every single billionaire, venture capitalist, and financial journalist in the back row could read it perfectly. At the very top in bold black letters was the title Horizon Zenith Limited Cayman Islands offshore account. Below it was a catastrophic list of unauthorized wire transfers. $50 million routed through Swiss intermediaries. $40 million sent to Phantom Real Estate Holdings in Dubai. The exact dates, amounts and routing numbers were highlighted in bright, glaring yellow. The ballroom descended into an eerie, confused silence. The wealthy investors squinted at the screen, trying to process the data. Then the screen automatically transitioned to the next slide. It displayed the fake vendor invoices. The $2 million yacht charter in Monaco. The $600,000 spent at luxury boutiques in Milan. All paid directly from the company operating fund. A low, dangerous murmur began to ripple through the crowd, as the financial elites suddenly realized they were looking at their own stolen money. Bradley had his back to the screen. He was still facing the crowd, his handsome face twisting from confusion into irritation. "What is going on?" he demanded, gesturing to the tech booth. "Turn that off immediately." But the crowd was no longer looking at him. The lead underwriter from Dubai, a stern man who had just been smiling moments before, stepped away from the podium. He took a pair of reading glasses from his breast pocket, put them on and stared up at the massive display. His face darkened with absolute fury. The presentation delivered its final devastating blow. The financial ledgers vanished, replaced by crisp, high-definition scans of medical and legal documents. It was the records from the Miami boutique clinic. The bilateral tubal ligature, signed by Sienna Cole, proving she had been physically incapable of bearing children for 5 years. Displayed right next to it was the official police report Bradley had filed against me, complete with his sworn signature, detailing the tragic fake miscarriage. Underneath both documents was a single, undeniable sentence printed in bold red text. The chief executive officer committed perjury to orchestrate a fraudulent corporate takeover. The low murmur in the ballroom erupted into a deafening roar of chaos. Investors began shouting at each other. The financial journalists realized they were witnessing the greatest corporate scandal of the decade, and frantically began snapping photos of the screen. The blinding flashes of their cameras lit up the room like a violent lightning storm. Bradley finally turned around. He looked up at the massive digital screen towering over him. The color drained from his face so fast. He looked as though he might physically collapse. His mouth opened but no sound came out. The pristine, arrogant facade he had spent his entire life building disintegrated in a matter of seconds. His hands began to shake uncontrollably. He dropped his expensive wireless microphone. It hit the wooden stage floor with a loud, painful shriek of feedback that made several investors cover their ears. He slowly turned his head and looked down at the base of the stage. He looked directly into my eyes. I did not break eye contact with Bradley as I stepped onto the first wooden stair leading up to the main stage. The heavy silence that had momentarily gripped the ballroom shattered, replaced by the chaotic shouting of hundreds of panicked investors. Jasmine moved fluidly to my right, stepping toward the technical control booth. Before the stunned audio engineer could protest, she reached over his console and grabbed a secondary wireless microphone. Flipping the power switch to green, she walked over and handed it to me. With a sharp confirming nod, I stepped onto the center of the stage. My crimson power suit, a stark contrast to the sea of dark tuxedos behind me. I raised the microphone. "My name is Gwen Mercer," I said, my voice echoing through the massive ballroom with crystal clarity. "Until yesterday morning, I was the chief financial officer of this firm. I am here to explain exactly what you see on that screen." The shouting in the room immediately died down. The venture capitalists, the Dubai underwriters and the financial press surged forward, their eyes darting between me and the massive digital ledger glowing behind my back. Bradley stood paralyzed just 3 feet away, his chest heaving, completely unable to formulate a single, coherent sentence. "What you are looking at is not a $500 million asset management firm," continued pacing slowly across the stage to command the entire room. "You are looking at a $198 million black hole. For the past 40 months, the chief executive officer has been operating a massive, highly coordinated Ponzi scheme." I gestured toward the screen. Jasmine, operating the presentation from her phone, advanced the slide. A complex flowchart appeared, tracing the exact movement of stolen capital. When domestic trades failed, he aggressively solicited new private capital to cover the margins. I explained, slipping entirely into my role as an elite forensic accountant. But he did not just cover his losses. He skimped heavily off the top. "Look at the highlighted routing numbers. He washed your investment capital through 3 intermediary Swiss banks before dropping it into a shell company called Horizon Zenith Limited, registered in the Cayman Islands. A wealthy investor in the second row pointed a shaking finger at Bradley. "Is this true?" he yelled over the rising noise. "Did you steal our money?" Bradley finally snapped out of his shock. "She is lying," he screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. He lunged toward me, trying to grab the microphone. "Turn off the screen. Security, get her off the stage right now." 2 federal agents disguised as private security stepped forward from the shadows of the curtain, placing their hands firmly on Bradley's shoulders and shoving him back. Bradley stumbled, looking at the security guards in absolute bewilderment. He had no idea they were federal agents. He thought his own hired muscle was turning against him. "Security works for the truth today, Bradley," I stated coldly, not even flinching when he lunged. I turned my attention back to the furious crowd. "The records displayed on this screen are not allegations. They are authenticated server logs, extracted directly from the internal corporate database. The Dubai real estate holdings do not exist. The mezzanine funds are completely empty. The money you wired to this firm yesterday morning is currently sitting in an offshore account, registered to his mistress." The lead underwriter from Dubai marched right up to the edge of the stage, his face purple with rage. "You presented us with audited financials. You signed legally binding valuations. He presented you with fabricated projections," I corrected, looking directly at the underwriter. "And last night, he attempted to force me to sign a liability waiver that would make me the sole legal scapegoat for the missing funds. He needed my signature to secure your capital injection. Today his plan was to ring that bell, dump his fraudulent founder shares onto the retail market, and board a private jet to a non-extradition country before noon." I looked down at the front row. Harold Mercer was gripping the edge of his table, his face ashen, his legacy completely destroyed. In less than 3 minutes, Caroline was hiding her face behind her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. as the surrounding investors glared at her with pure venom. The prestigious Mercer family name was instantly transformed into a synonym for catastrophic financial fraud. "There is no initial public offering today," I announced, my voice cutting through the rising tide of anger in the room. "There is no golden future. There is only a criminal investigation. The Securities and Exchange Commission has officially halted all trading on the Mercer ticker symbol. Your funds are frozen, and the federal government is currently seizing all remaining domestic assets." Chaos exploded. The ballroom transformed instantly from a sophisticated corporate celebration into an absolute riot. The polished facade of the Wall Street elite dissolved into primal panic. Men in $10,000 tuxedos surged toward the stage, pushing and shoving one another in a desperate attempt to get to Bradley. Glasses were smashed underfoot. The sharp crunching sounds lost beneath the deafening roar of betrayal. The lead underwriter from Dubai grabbed the edge of the glass podium and shoved it backward, sending it crashing to the wooden floor in a shower of sharp splinters. "Where is my money, you parasite?" The underwriter roared, his face inches from Bradley. "Give me my money right now, or I will tear you apart." Bradley backed away, his hands raised defensively. He was trembling violently. His perfectly styled hair, now disheveled and slick with cold sweat. He bumped into the giant digital screen behind him, effectively cornered by the furious mob. He looked toward the rear exits. But Special Agent Nathan Cross and his team had already dropped their disguises. Heavy tactical vests, bearing the bright yellow letters of federal law enforcement, were now entirely visible. They stood shoulder to shoulder, blocking every single door. There was nowhere to run. Jasmine and I stood calmly on the far side of the stage, completely untouched by the surging crowd. We watched the arrogant billionaire shrink into a terrified child. Bradley scrambled to the floor and grabbed the spare microphone. His voice shook so badly the speakers emitted a high-pitched whine that forced people to cover their ears. "Please listen to me," he begged, raising his free hand toward the angry investors. "I am a victim here. I did not want to do this. I was forced." The crowd quieted just a fraction, eager to hear who he would dare blame for a $200 million financial fraud. "It was Sienna," he screamed, his voice cracking in absolute terror. He pointed frantically toward the empty VIP chairs. "Sienna Cole, she manipulated me. She threatened to destroy my marriage if I did not fund her lavish lifestyle. She set up those Cayman Island accounts behind my back. She forced me to sign those wire transfers. I was only trying to protect my family from her ruthless extortion. She took the money and fled to the airport. This morning she is the mastermind. I am cooperating with the authorities. I am innocent." Right at that exact moment, the heavy brass doors near the service corridor swung violently open. 2 federal agents marched into the ballroom, flanking a hysterical, disheveled woman in heavy steel handcuffs. It was Sienna. Agent Cross had ordered her transported directly from the airport holding room to the hotel to officially identify her co-conspirators. On the scene, she was marched into the grand ballroom, just in time to hear Bradley scream her name over the massive sound system. She heard the man she loved, the man she committed massive federal crimes for, publicly brand her as an extortionist and the sole mastermind of the Ponzi scheme. Something inside Sienna completely snapped. Terror on her face vanished instantly, replaced by a feral, unhinged fury. With a sudden massive burst of adrenaline, she jerked her arms violently, breaking the immediate grip of the 2 federal agents. She charged down the center aisle, tearing through the crowd of stunned investors like a wild animal. Bradley saw her coming, and his eyes widened in sheer horror. "Sienna, stay back," he shouted, dropping the microphone and throwing his hands up over his face. But Sienna did not stop. She launched herself up the wooden stairs and threw her entire body weight directly at him. "You lying coward," she shrieked, her voice tearing through the massive ballroom. "You promised me the Maldives. You ruined my life." She tackled him with such intense force that they both went crashing heavily into the massive digital screen. The impact sent a glowing spiderweb of cracks across the high-definition display of their stolen money. Sienna straddled his chest, raising her handcuffed wrists and bringing them down repeatedly. She clawed at his face, tearing his expensive custom tuxedo shirt and screaming uncontrollably. "You said we were going together," she sobbed, scratching wildly at his neck. "You told me to sign those papers." Bradley flailed beneath her, frantically trying to shield his bleeding face from her manic assault. But he was too weak and utterly terrified to push her off. "Help me," he shrieked, practically sobbing, as Sienna landed another vicious blow. "Someone get this crazy woman off me." Down in the front row, Harold Mercer tried to rush the stage to save his son, but a group of furious venture capitalists physically blocked his path, shoving the old patriarch back into his chair. Caroline covered her eyes, screaming for the police. The financial journalists did not stop taking pictures. The blinding flashes of their cameras illuminated the pathetic scene, capturing every single second of the brutal physical brawl. The investors did not move a single muscle to intervene. They simply watched in absolute disgust as the brilliant chief executive officer and his glamorous mistress destroyed each other on the floor of their own ruined launch party. Special Agent Nathan Cross signaled his tactical team. 6 heavily armed agents rushed the stage, their heavy boots thudding aggressively against the polished wooden floorboards. They grabbed Sienna by her shoulders, prying her blooded fingers away from Bradley's ruined face. She kicked and shrieked, spitting venomous curses at him, until 2 agents secured her arms firmly behind her back and reapplied the heavy steel handcuffs. They dragged her to the far side of the stage, forcing her to her knees, while she continued to sob uncontrollably. Bradley remained on the floor, gasping for air and clutching his severely scratched face. His expensive custom tuxedo was torn to shreds, the crisp white shirt underneath stained with his own blood. Massive federal agent grabbed him by the collar, hauling him roughly to his feet. Bradley swayed dangerously, his eyes darting frantically around the room, searching for a friendly face, a corporate lawyer, or anyone who could buy his way out of this nightmare. He found absolutely no one. The wealthy venture capitalists, who had toasted him just minutes ago, were now glaring at him with pure, unadulterated hatred. Cross walked to the center of the stage, his heavy boots crushing the broken pieces of the glass podium. He picked up the dropped microphone. The piercing electronic feedback squeal instantly silenced the remaining frantic murmurs in the ballroom. "Nobody moves," Cross commanded, his voice carrying the absolute, uncompromising weight of the federal government. "The exits are fully secured. This entire building is now an active federal crime scene. If you are an employee of Mercer Asset Management, you will remain exactly where you are. If you are an investor, you will line up by the double doors and present your identification to my agents before you are permitted to leave the premises." Cross turned his sharp, cold attention directly to Bradley. He reached inside his tactical vest and pulled out a thick folded legal document bearing the official seal of a federal judge. "Bradley Mercer," Cross stated, his tone completely devoid of any human sympathy. I have a warrant for your immediate arrest. Executed by the United States Department of Justice. You are being charged with 3 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of corporate embezzlement, and 1 count of perjury in a federal court. For the wire fraud charges alone, you are facing a maximum penalty of 20 years in federal prison per count. Bradley shook his head wildly, blood dripping from his chin onto his ruined collar. You cannot do this to me. He stammered, his voice cracking with absolute panic. I am a licensed financial executive. I have a massive team of corporate attorneys. I demand to make a phone call right now. Cross let out a dry, humorless laugh that echoed through the silent ballroom. Your corporate attorneys are currently being raided by another tactical team at your downtown headquarters. Cross replied smoothly. They cannot help you. Furthermore, the Securities and Exchange Commission has officially placed your entire firm under federal receivership. Every bank account, every offshore shell company, and every hard drive you own belongs to the United States government now. A woman wearing a sharp navy suit stepped up beside Cross, flashing her official SEC badge to the terrified crowd. For the investors in the room, she announced clearly, your funds are currently locked. We are initiating a massive asset recovery operation. Immediately we have the Cayman Island ledgers. We know about Zenith Limited. We will be freezing those offshore assets, seizing the luxury properties, and recovering the stolen capital within the hour. Down in the front row, Caroline Mercer let out a loud piercing wail and collapsed heavily against her husband. Harold Mercer did not attempt to comfort her. He stared blankly at the stage, his face grey and completely hollow. He was watching his prestigious family legacy, his pristine social reputation, and his golden son's freedom evaporate into thin air in front of the entire financial world. Cross gestured sharply to his agents. Cuff him, and read him his rights. The agent, holding Bradley roughly, twisted his arms behind his back. The sharp, mechanical click of the steel ratcheting tight echoed loudly over the silent crowd. It was the exact same sound I had heard 30 days ago, when Bradley stood in my living room and watched the county police take me away in chains. Now the roles were entirely reversed. Bradley looked past the federal agents, his terrified, desperate eyes locking directly onto mine. Gwen, please, he whimpered, his voice barely a raspy whisper. Tell them it was a mistake. You know how to fix the ledgers. You can fix this. I walked slowly to the very edge of the stage, looking down at the pathetic, broken man who had tried to bury me in a concrete cell. I am a forensic accountant, Bradley, I replied, my voice cold, precise, and carrying absolute finality. I do not fix ledgers, I expose them. And your audit is officially complete. The silence that followed my statement was absolute. The federal agents did not hesitate. 2 massive officers grabbed Bradley by his arms, hauling him roughly to his feet. His legs barely seemed able to support his weight. The sharp metallic ratcheting of the steel handcuffs echoed again, this time locking tightly around Sienna's wrists. She was no longer screaming. The feral energy had drained from her body, leaving only the terrified realization that her glamorous life was over. She sobbed uncontrollably, her tears mixing with ruined makeup. Agent Cross gave a sharp nod to his tactical team. Get them out of here, Cross ordered, his voice cutting through the ambient noise of the stunned crowd. The transport vehicles are waiting at the loading dock. Secure the perimeter and begin processing the remaining executives. The walk of shame began. The agents forced Bradley and Sienna down the wooden steps, directly into the sea of furious investors and financial journalists. The press pool descended like starving wolves. High-definition cameras flashed relentlessly, illuminating the utter destruction of the Mercer empire. Journalists shoved their microphones forward, shouting rapid-fire questions about the missing millions. Bradley kept his head down, but there was nowhere to hide. His custom $10,000 tuxedo hung in shredded ribbons, stained with his own blood. Minutes ago he stood on that stage as a visionary, demanding respect from the Wall Street elite. Now he was a broken, exposed fraud marched through a gauntlet of hatred. Venture capitalist who toasted his success stepped back in physical disgust. Sienna fared no better. The agents practically carried her. As her legs gave out entirely, she kept turning her head back toward Bradley, spitting venomous curses, blaming him for ruining her life. The cameras captured every agonizing second of her humiliation. She wanted the luxurious life of a billionaire's partner, but she was leaving as a federal prisoner, facing decades behind bars. As the agents maneuvered them toward the central aisle, Bradley suddenly planted his feet and violently twisted his shoulders. Refusing to move forward, he turned his desperate, bloodshot eyes toward where Jasmine and I were standing, near the shattered remains of the glass podium. He looked at me with a level of pathetic pleading I had never seen before. "Gwen, please do not let them do this to me," Bradley begged, his voice cracking into a high-pitched whine. His arrogant mask was completely gone, replaced by the terrified face of a coward, facing the consequences of his own actions. "You are my wife, Gwen. We built this firm together. I will give you everything. I will sign the estate over to you entirely. Just tell the FBI you made a mistake with the ledgers. Tell them the offshore accounts were authorized. Corporate expenditures. You are the only one who can explain the numbers. Please, Gwen, I am begging you. Do not let me rot in a federal prison." I stood perfectly still, watching the pathetic display unfold. I did not cross my arms or look away from his face. I did not smile or show a single ounce of triumph. In the world of forensic accounting, emotions are a liability. I simply looked at him with the cold, detached professionalism of an auditor reviewing a bankrupt ledger. "You do not have any clean capital left to offer me, Bradley," I stated, my voice carrying clearly over the clamor of the press. "Every single dollar you own currently belongs to the United States government. The beautiful estate in Aspen was already legally mine. You have absolutely nothing left to negotiate with." Today a sharp laugh escaped Jasmine's lips. She stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with me. "You really do not understand how a federal indictment works, do you, Bradley?" She asked, her tone dripping with disdain. "They do not need your cooperation." Gwen gave them the raw data and the shell company incorporation documents. They have your signature on every single fraudulent wire transfer. You are the prime target. Agent Cross stepped in front of Bradley, entirely blocking his view of me. "You are done talking," Mercer Cross growled. "Move him out now." The federal agents jerked Bradley forward with brutal and absolute efficiency. He stumbled, nearly falling to his knees. As they dragged him down the long center aisle, the aggressive financial journalists swarmed around him, their camera flashes creating a blinding strobe effect that captured his absolute terror. From every conceivable angle, he looked back over his shoulder one final time, his mouth opening to scream my name again. But the heavy wooden doors of the grand ballroom swung open and swallowed him whole. Sienna was dragged out right behind him, her hysterical sobbing echoing briefly before the doors slammed shut entirely, sealing their tragic fate forever. 6 months passed. The blistering heat of that chaotic summer launch party faded into a bitter, biting New York winter. I sat in the second row of the gallery, inside a towering federal courthouse in downtown Manhattan. The heavy mahogany paneling of the courtroom smelled of lemon, polish and ancient dust. A fitting environment for the absolute conclusion of the Mercer legacy. Jasmine sat quietly to my right, wearing a sharp charcoal blazer, her posture perfect. We did not speak. We did not need to. The final audit was about to be officially closed by a federal judge. The gallery was packed, but it was not filled with the adoring financial journalists or wealthy venture capitalists who had once worshipped my former husband. The room was mostly occupied by furious, defrauded investors and grim-faced federal prosecutors. Across the center aisle, sitting in the front row, were Harold and Caroline Mercer. The transformation they had undergone in just 6 short months was staggering. The arrogant patriarch and the diamond-draped matriarch were entirely gone. In their place sat 2 hollow, exhausted ghosts. When the Securities and Exchange Commission seized Bradley's assets, the financial contamination spread rapidly. The federal regulators scrutinized every single dollar connected to the Mercer name. Harold desperately tried to fund his son's elite criminal defense using the family trust, but the aggressive corporate litigators drained them dry with terrifying speed. Within 4 months, the Oak Ridge Country Club revoked their membership due to unpaid dues. The sprawling family estate was quietly listed for sale to cover mounting legal debts. Caroline was wearing an old faded wool coat, her posture slumped, her eyes staring blankly at the floor. They were completely bankrupt, both financially and socially. The heavy wooden side door opened, and the bailiff led the defendants into the courtroom. Sienna walked in first. She was wearing a baggy, shapeless khaki prison uniform that washed out her complexion entirely. The glamorous Mistress, who had once demanded a luxury villa in the Maldives, now looked incredibly small and terrified. Her hair was pulled back into a messy, unkempt knot, and her hands trembled violently as she took her seat next to a public defender. She had tried to negotiate a plea deal, but her direct signature on the Cayman Island incorporation documents made her a primary co-conspirator. The federal judge, a stern woman with zero tolerance for white-collar crime, did not waste any time. She read through the charges with clinical precision. Sienna Cole, the judge announced, her voice echoing through the silent room. You actively participated in a conspiracy to defraud investors of nearly $200 million. You committed perjury by filing false medical and police reports to unlawfully imprison an innocent woman. Your actions were entirely driven by profound greed and a complete disregard for human life. Sienna stood up, her knees buckling slightly. She sobbed aloud. Wet, pathetic sound that earned zero sympathy from the crowded gallery. I sentence you to 5 years in a federal correctional facility, the judge declared, striking her gavel. Sienna collapsed back into her chair, burying her face in her hands. She wailed, rocking back and forth as the reality of her lost youth washed over her. 5 years in federal lockup meant her 20s were officially over. She would emerge at 33, a convicted felon with absolutely nothing to her name. The bailiff stepped forward, pulling her up by her arms and marching her out of the courtroom. She did not even look at Bradley as she was taken away. Then it was Bradley's turn. He stood up slowly. The charismatic, handsome chief executive officer was completely unrecognizable. His face was pale and drawn, his eyes sunken into deep dark shadows. The confidence that had once radiated from him was replaced by a suffocating, heavy dread. He looked at the judge, his chest rising and falling rapidly. Bradley Mercer. The judge continued, her tone growing even colder. You orchestrated a massive Ponzi scheme that destroyed the life savings of hundreds of families. You manipulated the justice system, abused your professional authority, and showed zero remorse until you were caught. You are a predator in a tailored suit. Bradley swallowed hard, staring straight ahead. 3 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of corporate embezzlement, and 1 count of perjury. I sentence you to 20 years in federal prison. The judge commanded. Because this is a federal conviction, there is no possibility of early parole. You will serve every single day of that sentence. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. Caroline Mercer let out a high-pitched cry and buried her face against Harold's shoulder. But Harold did not move. He just stared at his son, completely broken. 20 years. The number hung in the air like an executioner's blade. Bradley swayed on his feet, reaching out to grip the defense table, just to keep himself from collapsing onto the floor. His lips moved but no sound came out. The sheer weight of 2 decades in a federal cage had completely crushed him. The bailiff approached, snapping the heavy steel handcuffs around his wrists. Bradley turned his head as he was being led out. His hollow, terrified eyes scanned the gallery and locked directly onto mine. I did not smile. I did not blink. I simply watched him disappear through the heavy wooden door, exactly as he had once planned for me. The view from the 42nd floor of our Manhattan office offered an unobstructed panorama of the New York skyline. The morning sun reflected brilliantly off the glass skyscrapers of Wall Street. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, holding a warm ceramic mug of dark roast coffee. The sleek frosted glass doors behind me bore the silver lettering of our new Vanguard Forensic Investigations. It had only been 6 months since the collapse of Mercer Asset Management. But Jasmine and I had not wasted a single second. We took the immense credibility we gained from exposing the largest corporate fraud of the decade and built our own empire. I was the chief executive officer. Jasmine was my chief operating officer and equal partner. We did not just audit ledgers. We specialized in corporate espionage, uncovering executive embezzlement, and vetting private equity firms before major public offerings. Ironically, the very venture capitalist who had attended Bradley's doomed launch party were now our highest-paying clients. They paid us exorbitant monthly retainers just to ensure their own executives were not pulling a Bradley Mercer. Jasmine had finalized her divorce from Derek 2 months ago, without the stolen funds from Bradley's Ponzi scheme to prop them up. The Mercer family fortune evaporated entirely. Derek was currently working as a mid-level retail manager, just to pay off his mounting legal debts. Jasmine, on the other hand, was thriving. She had just purchased a stunning penthouse overlooking Central Park, entirely with her own hard-earned money. She was finally living the life she deserved, free from the suffocating judgment of a racist and financially corrupt family. The heavy glass door to my office swung open. Jasmine walked in, wearing a stunning tailored white suit, holding her own coffee mug. She did not say a word. She simply picked up the remote control from my mahogany desk and pointed it at the large, flat-screen television mounted on the far wall of the office. She unmuted the morning financial news broadcast. "Turn it up," I said, taking a sip of my coffee. On the screen, a local news helicopter was broadcasting live footage from outside the federal holding facility in upstate New York. A heavy armored transport van was idling in the prison courtyard. 2 armed federal marshals appeared on the screen, leading a line of inmates toward the vehicle. And there, right in the middle of the chain gang, was my former husband. Bradley was wearing a bright orange federal prison jumpsuit, His wrists were shackled to a heavy chain, wrapped around his waist, and his ankles were bound by iron cuffs that forced him to take short, shuffling steps. His head was bowed, his shoulders slumped in absolute defeat. He looked small, insignificant, and entirely stripped of the arrogant power he had once wielded so carelessly. The media commentator narrated his transfer to a maximum security federal penitentiary, where he would serve his mandatory 20-year sentence without the possibility of early release. Jasmine walked over and stood beside me. She looked at the television and then looked around our beautiful, multi-million-dollar office. She raised her coffee mug to the complete redistribution of power. She said, a sharp, satisfied smile lighting up her face. I raised my mug and clinked it against hers. The sharp ceramic chime echoed pleasantly in the quiet, expensive air of my office. To the truth, I replied. I turned away from the television and looked back out over the sprawling city below us. A year ago, Bradley thought he could erase me. He thought that by throwing me into a 6x8 concrete cell for 30 days, he would break my spirit, steal my assets, and force me to disappear quietly into the background of his glamorous life. He believed the ultimate lie of the narcissist. He believed that I was weak, but he forgot that a woman who has had everything stripped away from her is the most dangerous opponent in the world. I did not sit in the darkness and cry over the injustice of my situation. I used the silence to sharpen my mind. I used his betrayal as fuel to build a weapon that he never saw coming. My name is Gwen. I am 34 years old and I am the architect of my own life. If you are watching this, and you are currently dealing with someone who dismisses your intelligence, steals your credit, or tries to box you into a corner, listen to me very carefully. Do not accept the narrative they have written for you. Do not let their lies become your reality. You have the power to audit your own life. You have the power to cut the toxic liabilities from your balance sheet and invest entirely in your own potential. The people who try to bury you often forget that you are a seed. All you need is time, pressure, and the absolute will to rise above the dirt they threw on you. Thank you for listening to my story. If this journey of reclaiming power and rewriting destiny resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with any woman who needs a reminder that her worth is never determined by the people who failed to appreciate her. Let me know in the comments below how you have turned a major setback into your greatest comeback. I read every single one. Remember, the pen that writes. Your future belongs entirely in your own hands. Never let anyone else hold it. The story of Gwen's triumph over Bradley's deception illuminates a profound lesson about the nature of true, unyielding power. When faced with catastrophic betrayal, public humiliation, and systemic gaslighting, the immediate human instinct is quite often explosive reactivity or paralyzing despair. However, this thrilling narrative teaches us that calculated resilience is vastly superior to emotional vengeance. Bradley weaponized Gwen's environment against her, using his wealthy family of fabricated crime and complex legal traps to completely strip her of her freedom, finances, and professional reputation. Yet Gwen's ultimate victory did not emerge from screaming her innocence or begging the elite for mercy. It came from her unwavering ability to detach emotionally and rely entirely on undeniable facts. By treating her own life's catastrophe as a forensic audit, she meticulously dismantled an entire corporate empire of lies starting from within a concrete jail cell. She proved that when the corrupt world attempts to bury you under false accusations, maintaining absolute clarity and intellectual discipline remains your greatest impenetrable armor against their deceit. Furthermore, the story underscores that rebuilding your own life is the ultimate form of justice. Gwen did not just send her abusers to a federal penitentiary. She redirected her exceptional analytical skills to establish an elite corporate investigation firm alongside Jasmine. Together they transformed their profound trauma into an unshakable foundation for mutual success. The villains lost everything because their empire was built on arrogant fraud, whereas Gwen thrived because her foundation was rooted in truth. Ultimately, no matter how deeply someone tries to box you into a false narrative, you always retain the brilliant capacity to expose the truth and thrive. Audit your own life aggressively. Cut out the toxic liabilities and relentlessly invest in your own undeniable, limitless potential.